much. Good evening and welcome to the City of Petaluma regular meeting of the City Council and the Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency. Can we do a roll call, please?
Barrett.
Here.
Arnicle.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
King.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
Kosake.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. And we will do the Pledge of Allegiance now. And I'll just ask everybody to mute themselves while I say it. And I think our moderator is going to put up the flag, perhaps not. There it is. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we're going to have a moment of silence this evening, and we're going to have this moment of silence in recognition of former Petaluma City Council member and Sonoma County Supervisor Jim Harbison, who died on January 22nd. Jim was always very gracious and accessible, even long after he left office. In addition to that, and even closer to home, I'd like to have us take a moment of silence for the passing of two of our council members' parents. Councilwoman Fisher's father, Richard William Fisher Sr., passed away on Friday. And Councilmember Dennis Posake's mother also passed away on Friday, Evelyn Posake. Thank you. Agenda changes and deletions to the current agenda only. Do we have anybody suggesting any changes? Seeing no one, we will move into the proclamation. We have a proclamation for Black History Month, and we will have Gloria Robinson and Faith Ross will be receiving this. So in the City of Petaluma Proclamation for Black History Month, February 2021. Whereas Petaluma Blacks for Community Development was established in 1978 by a group of concerned Black residents to acquaint the community with Black culture and history, to provide support for new Black families moving into the area, and to ensure that the Black community became a positive part of the larger Petaluma community. And whereas Petaluma Blacks for Community Development, in keeping with their goals and objectives, have continuously provided a venue for sharing with the community through an annual Black History program, museum exhibits, and individual members' involvement in various community organizations and activities. The group has continued to provide support for Black families through social gatherings and reaching out to each other. And whereas Petaluma Blacks for Community Development has continuously supported our youth by making them active participants in the organization, encouraging them in their involvement in school and community activities, and teaching them to value our history. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Teresa Barrett, Mayor of Petaluma, along with the members of the Petaluma City Council, do hereby acknowledge that February 2021 is Black History Month, and commend Petaluma Blacks for Community Development in their efforts to support the community at large and provide our city with Black cultural activities and an awareness of Black heritage. So, Gloria, this is your chance to speak.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Teresa Barrett and City Council members. On behalf of Petaluma Blacks for Community Development, we would like to thank you for your generous support each year during Black History Month. We'd like to thank you too for this proclamation. This is our 42nd year of doing Black history here in the community. And again, we would like to say thank you for your support. Okay.
Thank you. And now,
And I'd like to introduce the president of Petaluma Blacks for Community Development, Faith Ross.
Thank you, Gloria, and
You're welcome.
City for the proclamation. I'd like to say that this year has just been a wonderful, or it's starting out as a wonderful event for us. February. It is an exhibit that we are very excited about. It involves the whole community. It's just not about Black families or about Black history. It really is about our community and what we can do as a community is what happened. I think that Mayor Barrett and our city manager will remember that in November of last year, I contacted you with this idea that I had about an exhibit that would be in storefronts. And the both of you sounded very, very positive about it. And at that time, I had also spoken with Paige Green, who is a photographer here. Now, I met Paige with Tide, and that's how I knew her. And so with her help, we have put together, with her, not just with her help, there has been a lot of people involved in putting this exhibit together. And if you go downtown and see the pictures in the storefronts, you will recognize that it does really reflect our community as a whole. And it's really become not just a Black history event or Petaluma Blacks for Community Development. It has become the community's event, and I really appreciate that. So I'd like to say a special thank you to the mayor and to the city manager for their support in this, and also to Paige Green, who has done a fantastic job with the photographs that are out there. Molly Beck, who just came up beside us and just has worked tremendously on this. And Christine Walker, who has just given so much to this project. The advertisement, the little announcements and everything, she produced herself. And so it truly, and people have been walking around putting the announcements in for us. And it really is a community exhibit, and I really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
thank you, Faith, and thank you for all the work that your group does in our community. And I really so appreciate how you've been able to pivot to making this exhibit accessible out of doors. So,
Right.
thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay. And also, I'd also like to say that I really want to give a big shout out to our city manager, who really helped, allowed the city to be a partner in working on this. So I think that was a terrific leadership. So again, thank you. And on to a great month of events.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're moving on our to our presentation, and this evening we have our supervisor David Rabbit with us, who is going to speak to us a little bit about what he'd like to talk about, and he's going to introduce the Sonoma County Strategic Plan as well. So please go ahead, David. You are muted.
You would think after the 10th or so Zoom meeting of the day that one would learn to unmute first, but good evening, Mayor, and thank you again for having me tonight. I appreciate that very much. And good evening, Council members Fisher, King, McDonald, and congratulations to Council Member Healy on your reelection, and congratulations and welcome to Council Member Posake and Vice Mayor Barnacle. It's great to be with you, and of course, good evening to City Manager Flynn, City Attorney Danley, and City Clerk Rose. So again, thank you for having me. I thought prior to introducing the strategic plan, I just hit on a few topics with the mayor's indulgence. Obviously, you can't talk about anything these days without starting off with COVID. At the county, it's been COVID 24/7. In fact, we pledge not to bring any new initiatives forward until at least July to truly concentrate on the county's work on COVID-related matters. It's been a difficult slog, as you all know. Obviously, at the federal level, to say it got off on the wrong foot is an understatement. I will give them credit in terms of producing in a quick pace the vaccine. The distribution of the vaccine was also probably not as rolled out as uniformly as we would all like. So the focus was on the approval and production, but not so much the distribution. And the state, quite frankly, has also struggled along the way with shifting criteria, some surprise announcements, plans, lots of plans, not a lot of follow through, and some inconsistencies. But I think at the end of the day, everyone is trying to do the right thing in this very unique time, trying to address the issues at hand. You know, prior to the vaccine rollout, our testing strategy was actually working prior to the latest stay-at-home order was handed down. And now I think the challenge in front of the board will be to find the resources to both continue to test at high numbers, which takes a lot of resources, manpower, people power, and as well as and that obviously needs to get us to the less restrictive tiers to open up more of the economy. At the same time, we need to distribute the vaccine as quickly as possible, and that takes as many people, if not more, as what it does from the testing side. So we have a lot of work in front of us to really hit these things. We're in disaster mode, where employees are pulled from all departments to work on COVID-related issues. The county's role is to facilitate and coordinate vaccine distribution, and I think there's a lot of miscommunication about whose role is what. And I think it's like our healthcare system, though. It's a fractured system. You know, shipments are made directly to major hospitals as well to the county, but the county does not have direct patient care. We have health partners who we contract with. Even to get the total number of vaccines distributed or delivered into the county in any given week, we have to go back into Sacramento, try to pull those numbers out. And as you all know, Sacramento sometimes has been shutting down those systems. There's some software issues, there's some other issues that happen with testing along the way as well. So it's been frustrating. And then most recently this last weekend in the OptumServe in Roanoke Park, and I just wanted to talk about that real briefly. That was one of 4 pilot programs that the state put forward. It was Sonoma County and Contra Costa County in Northern California, and it was Riverside and San Bernardino down in Southern California. Contracts between OptumServe and the state to come in and serve in this capacity. Our job was to find them a spot and to work on the logistics with that. We told them in Northern California, both Contra Costa and Sonoma, we were concentrating on over 75. And in fact, our press release, all the social media, everything was over 75. And lo and behold, what happened was they never changed their app, their website that said over 65. The problem here in Sonoma County is that we have 102,000 people over the age of 65. The week that the governor extended the tiers to include those over 65 residents, we got a total of 4,000 vaccines delivered to us. So you can see it's a supply problem, supply and demand. As well, we have about 19,000 individuals in the tier 1A, which we still have some outstanding, working our way through that. What we've done is to really go back to 75. 75 and older in this county is 36,000 people. That also includes a pause on inoculating teachers. The teachers are about 15,000 individuals. Interestingly enough, there's 1,600 teachers that are countywide that are over the age of 65. So really concentrating on the over 75 population. That's where 65% of all fatalities occurred to date, including, unfortunately, just 3 today. These patients also end up being hospitalized for longer and again have worse health outcomes. So there's obviously a medical imperative that we really go after the most vulnerable there. We are working very diligently to make sure that equity is at front and center of the distribution. It's challenging because of the way that the numbers are, and the supply chain coming in it's inconsistent and somewhat unpredictable. You can see Kaiser, you can see Sutter, you can see St. Joe's all having similar issues. How do you actually schedule appointments when you don't know how much vaccine you're going to have on hand at any given time? And that's really the crux of the problem. We can't, Moderna and Pfizer cannot produce enough quickly enough. And meanwhile, we're all going to have to be patient and really try to see how we can get ourselves through this time period, trying to get as many inoculated as possible, but do it in a way that makes sense, is organized, and patience is, at this point in time, I think, sometimes seemingly a rare commodity. So we are working away on that. I can tell you that there's plans for inoculation sites here in Petaluma as well. It really just a matter of making sure that we can open up those sites with enough vaccine on hand to have it be flowing going forward. And again, we're kind of in the same boat as all of our health partners going forward. A little more difficult probably in Sonoma County because, again, we're not the health providers. We don't have a quote-unquote county hospital like some of the other counties do. But I think it's pretty much statewide issue, and there's a lot of talk back and forth with the governor's office regarding, what's rolling out well, what's not, where they're going. And I think that's part of what the discussion on the Blue Cross kind of taking over the administration or distribution of vaccines is really all about. I thought real quickly, I know the county, the city clerk mentioned, I can tell you that Measure O is going to come back to the board for talking about implementation on February 23rd, the same day that Measure P will. Measure O is, of course, the mental health quarter-cent sales tax. It's support behavioral health facilities, emergency psychiatric services, mental health and substance use disorder outpatient services, excuse me, behavioral health and homelessness care coordination, transitional and permanent supportive housing as well. It's a quarter cent in the prior to COVID was estimated to bring in about 25 million annually, or 250 million over the course of the 10-year measure. So the details regarding that implementation will return to the board on the 23rd. The structure will be in place before April 1st, which is the date revenue collection commences. There will be an oversight committee, a citizens oversight committee, to review the expenditures from the transactions and the use transactions in use tax, as well as overseeing the annual independent audit. And we are accepting applications. So if anyone's out there from Petaluma in the South County that's interested for the Measure O Citizens Oversight Committee, I really invite all those to apply on the county's website for an application. Those are due on the 12th of February. And you can also contact me or directly through my office if you know of anyone who's interested. The same thing is true with Measure P. Measure P, of course, is the what we call the ILERO. It repeals and replaces Article 27 of Title II of the Sonoma County Code, talking about what our ILERO piece, and there's a little bit of a legal analysis going on about the implementation therein, including an MOU between the ILERO office and our sheriff's office going forward. That also will come back to the board, I believe, on the 23rd for its implementation plan. We did, and actually I moved to bring 2 additional attorneys in the last budget cycle into ILERO to make sure that we can keep up on the audits as well as possible, as well as making sure that we were prepared going forward for what was going to be coming out of Sacramento and here locally with the measure being approved. So that will come to the board on the 23rd for the kind of final configuration there. And with that, before I turn to, I'm not sure how you want me to do this, Mayor, I can go right into talking about the importance of having our strategic plan, or I can answer questions on any of the above.
I think, why don't you go straight into the strategic plan, and then we can get questions at one time.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So, yeah, and thank you. So the purpose of the Sonoma County's 5-year strategic plan is to inform which policies and projects are prioritized for the next 5 years, notwithstanding, of course, the unexpected flood, wildfire, or pandemic, which has kept us all busy these last so many years. The plan will guide how we align short and long-term objectives with operations and budgets so that our actions reflect a clear sense of purpose and demonstrate meaningful progress. The county has been working on developing the framework for this plan since 2019. We launched an extensive employee and community engagement process in November to collect feedback and refine the plan's goals and objectives. I think this is actually a little unique for the county. I don't know if we've necessarily always gone out including into city council, to really garner input for the county strategic plan in the same fashion. But today's presentation to the city council is really meant to be a listening session. We want to hear if you have any questions, what you think might be missing from the plan, and where you think there are opportunities for the county and city to collaborate, something we are always looking for. And I know that I see both Crystal Quirjero, Deputy County Administrator, and Administrative Analyst Catherine DePasqua are here with us to make that presentation. So I'll be happy to answer any questions before I pass it on to them.
I'm not seeing any hands raised, so let's just go forward with the presentation. Thank you. Ms. DePasqua, are you going to start?
Yes, let me go ahead and share my screen. Hold on one second. So thank you, Supervisor Rabbit, and good evening, council members. My name is Catherine DePasqua. I'm the strategic plan project lead, and joining me today is Crystal Quirjero, as Supervisor Rabbit mentioned. She's our Deputy County Administrator. The goal of today's presentation is really to hear from our city partners before we finalize our strategic plan. We'll be presenting the revised goals and objectives, and we'll be available to answer any questions you guys may have. To give you some background on the strategic planning process, the Board of Supervisors approved the draft strategic plan on August 11th, knowing that we would start a pretty significant employee and community engagement process that would then further revise the goals and objectives. The revised plan went back to the board on January 26th, where the board reviewed the feedback that we gathered during the engagement process and provided direction for some further revisions. The final plan is going to go back to the board on March 2nd for final adoption. So to the extent that the City Council has formal input that it would like to share with our board, we're recommending that you submit it in writing by February 12th so that it can be included in the materials going to the board on March 2nd. We are, of course, available to answer questions today, and I'll be taking notes as well. So strategic plans tend to have some different terms for components of the plan. So here's just a quick overview of how we've set up ours. Pillars identify the most important strategic priorities for the county to accomplish over the next 5 years. The 5 pillars that our board have identified are healthy and safe communities, organizational excellence, racial equity and social justice, climate action and resiliency, and resilient infrastructure. So under each pillar, there's a set of goals, and these are the outcomes we want to achieve. And then underneath each goal, there's a set of objectives, and these are the measures of progress needed in order to achieve that goal. And then even beyond that, once the plan has been adopted by our board, there's going to be an assigned lead for each objective, and they're going to be responsible for developing implementation plans in order to achieve each objective. So the county has made a significant effort to gather feedback from both our employees and community members. The purpose of that was to get input and reactions on the draft plan before we finalized it. We wanted to discover if there were any additional goals or objectives that should be added to the plan. And we wanted to understand the relative priority of the objectives in the eyes of county employees and community members. In both employee focus groups and community sessions, we polled participants to see which objectives they thought we should tackle first. And then this information is going to be helpful when we start developing our implementation plans. So for employees, we hosted several focus groups, multiple drop-in open house sessions, and launched an online survey to gather feedback. For community members, we hosted several community sessions in both English and Spanish, one for each pillar, made presentations to numerous community stakeholder groups, developed a session in a box for organizations who wanted to host their own focus groups, and we launched online surveys in both English and Spanish. So up next, we're going to dive into the actual goals and objectives of the plan. And we can do this a couple different ways, Madam Mayor, based on how much time you guys have available. So I can present it slide by slide, pillar by pillar, and we could take questions that are pillar specific, or I could go through all 5 pillars, and then we could just do questions at the end. How would you like to do that?
I think it would be better to go through everything at one time, and then we can do it at the end. So thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. So as I mentioned before, Crystal and I are both here and available to answer questions. We're not necessarily the subject matter experts, but we have been engaged in the engagement process all along. So we have heard a good amount of them, but we will do our best. So I'm going to go through these quickly, and then we can get to the questions. So healthy and safe communities provide quality and equitable housing, health, and human services for all. I'm just going to read through the goals. Goal 1, expand integrated systems of care to address gaps in services to the county's most vulnerable. Goal 2, establish equitable and data-driven distribution of services. Goal 3, in collaboration with cities, increase affordable housing development near public transportation and services. Goal 4, reduce the county's overall homeless population by 10% each year by enhancing services based on coordination and collaboration. And finally, goal 5, continue to invest in public safety so that residents and visitors feel safe in our community. Move on to the next pillar. Organizational excellence. Be an innovative, effective, engaged, and transparent organization focused on quality programs and services. This is an internal facing pillar, but again, as you know, the county's largest employer, it is important that it was a separate pillar in the plan. So goal 1, strengthen operational effectiveness, fiscal reliability, and accountability. Goal 2, increase information sharing and transparency and improve county and community engagement. Goal 3, become an employer of choice with a diverse workforce that reflects our community and an employer with a positive work culture that results in engaged and developed employees. And finally, goal 4, seek out grant funding to enhance programs and improve infrastructure. Racial equity and social justice. Achieve racial equity in county service provision and ensure a workforce reflective of the community that we serve. Goal 1, foster a county organizational culture that supports commitment to achieving racial equity. Goal 2, implement strategies to make the county workforce reflect county demographic across all levels. Goal 3, ensure racial equity throughout the county policy decisions and service delivery. Goal 4, engage key community and internal stakeholders to develop priorities and to advance racial equity. Climate action and resiliency. Make Sonoma County carbon neutral by 2030. Goal 1, continue to invest in wildfire preparedness and resiliency strategies. So I would highlight that this particular goal was one that we added after our engagement process, just because there was so much feedback from both the cities that we talked to and the community and employees that there wasn't enough focus on wildfire resiliency. So this was a new addition, so just highlighting it here. Goal 2, invest in the community to enhance disaster resiliency and become carbon neutral by 2030. Goal 3, make all county facilities carbon-free, zero waste, and resilient. Goal 4, maximize sustainability and emission reductions in all county fleet vehicles. And goal 5, maximize carbon sequestration through land conservation work and land use policies. And our last pillar is resilient infrastructure. Enhance all hazard resiliency for the community by investing in county roads, building and property, communications, and flood protection. Goal 1, invest in county buildings and technology solutions to enhance service delivery and improve employee mobility. Goal 2, invest in capital systems to ensure continuity of operations and disaster response. Goal 3, continue to invest in critical road infrastructure. Goal 4, implement countywide technological solutions to promote resiliency and expand community access. And the final goal, support, fund, and expand flood protection. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then turn it over to the City Council for any questions you guys may have.
Okay, thank you very much. So that really was a 30,000 foot presentation. Where can people in the community get access to read that if they want to go deeper, or even the council if we want to look deeper into this?
So that PowerPoint is attached to your agenda, which has all of the goals and objectives. It's also posted on the Sonoma County's strategic plan website, along with the draft strategic plan as well. And I can provide your clerk links to our January 26th board item as well, which has a little bit even more information on there as well.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned that any comments that people had, whether it was on the council or I assume from the community, you want by the 12th of this month, and you want them in writing, and which I assume is email as well. And where could people send those?
They can send it to strategic planning, all one word, at sonoma-county.org.
Perfect. Okay, and it would probably be good if we could have that on our agenda with this at this point, so that if people did want to have a comment, they would know how to get it to you. So with that, I will see if there's anybody. I see Council Member McDonald's hand is up.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And, really appreciate the presentation. One thing that's worrying me a lot is the homeless situation in the county, and the county's dealing with it. I noticed that's a key in this strategic plan, but in the element where it says that the county's going to work with cities, it totally leaves out the continuum of care. There's no mention of that board, and it also mentions that they hope to have a collaboration by 2024. Both of those seem modest in regards to the needs we have. And so, I realize the county's doing quite a bit on this. It's not like they're not putting in their own money and all the federal and state money that's coming to us. But, it's just possible that it needs to be addressed differently at the county, perhaps a different lead agency, perhaps independence for the continuum of care. I'm glad to see the KPMG study underway, but are there any thoughts you can share with us about how we make a better dent in this and how we collaborate all the cities together? Right now, all the cities are up in arms about the HUD agency that's supposed to be operating under the, with the county and the governance issues with that. We're not making enough progress, and I'm hoping the strategic plan gets us to a better place on that. Any thoughts?
If I may, yes, I think you're absolutely right. We're not making enough progress, and we need to redouble our efforts, and we need to, and that was part of what, the history of the CDC, obviously with the loss of redevelopment, it changed, quite frankly, quite a bit. And then along came, for the county at least, the crisis that we encountered with the Joe Rodota Trail and the nexus between health, homelessness. It made sense at that time with the loss of our CDC director to bring health into the mix, to really have those wraparound services out of the one department. Some counties do this. Some counties have super agencies. We've looked at that as well. Excuse me, both health and human in one shop. But as you mentioned, the KPMG study that's underway, I just did my interview with them this last week. That'll come to fruition, I think, in March, and really, excuse me, they're going to be recommending to the board the best way to move forward. And as you know, with CDC these days, you've got three kind of distinct responsibilities. You've got this housing development arm, which is entirely different and than the other work, a homelessness programs, and then a housing administrator with the vouchers and all of that, all of which could be handled in different ways within different departments. And I think this actually goes into talking about trying to be that excellent organization as well. Where does this best fit? How does it best get handled at the county level? And of course, everything we want to do, we want to leverage and partner with our city partners, and as well as with all the other state and federal sources as well. I think Measure O will play a part into that as to accelerate things going forward. Although not all of it, obviously, is into homelessness, but a good portion is. So you're right. We need to continue to push ourselves to make sure that we're addressing these issues and taking the long term, but really trying to get roofs over people's heads. going forward.
Right. Thank you. The continuum of care doesn't feel that it's had the opportunity to have input on the strategic plan, and the lack of naming them by name, is an oversight. But if those get in, that would be great. Second question had to do with mental health. It doesn't sound like Measure O funds have any direct linkage into the South County. How do we pull some of that into South County?
Oh, it'll get into South County. That's my job, is to make sure, and again, as you all know, that's the continual challenge for the second district supervisor, is to make sure that my colleagues understand that I am the only one without a piece of Santa Rosa, that Sonoma County is not just all Santa Rosa, that there is a second largest city here in the South County. And, luckily we have great organizations here where I can pick the phone up and talk to Elise Hempel or Chuck at COTS to really understand what the needs are. They're very much in tune with what's happening at the county level, and always be able to drive those dollars to the South County in a way that is, hopefully more than geographically fair, but really puts us in a better place going forward. The issues in Santa Rosa are a little different. And I know that city manager, and I believe I've talked to some of you about some of those issues, particularly on the homelessness side. The scale and scope of things are just slightly different. Doesn't mean that they're not real, and that the resources don't need to be here in the South County as well. So I know the other piece that we've all been talking about, I'm sure, is the whole, quote unquote, cahoots model out of Eugene, Oregon, and how that gets implemented. I'm on the EMS ad hoc committee right now with Supervisor Linda Hopkins, and we're talking about that and bringing that forward on the EMS RFP that's going to go out for the unincorporated counties. And I think it's been an interesting conversation. I can tell you there's a pilot program over in Napa that I was told about called ET3, Triage, Treat, and Transfer, which is really trying to get Medicare to step up and pay for treatment other than just bringing someone to the emergency room, which is not cost effective, as we all know. A lot of this has to do with trying to get the dollars from the payers need to recognize and pay those dollars for the less expensive overall treatment to make sure that we can do the right thing and have the better outcomes. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And I know, I know the city manager would love to have dollars out of Measure O for that. I think that I was looking for an email that I had from Bill Carter that I know talks about the, we as a whole, a county, all 9 cities and the county itself need to get together and figure out how we should really streamline and implement this, going forward. And then of course, how those dollars get into the mix. But I know I'll be an advocate for Petaluma to make sure that we don't get left behind, that the services here are going to be equitable, if not more so than the rest of the county.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have several hands up now. Councilmember Fisher, followed by Vice Mayor Barnacle, Posake, and King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and welcome Supervisor Rabbit. Nice to have you here. That was such a brief presentation, and I haven't read the documentation that it's really hard to comment on it, but I do think that with your goal of climate neutrality in 2030, and that being the goal of the Regional Climate Protection Authority as well, and our city just took that as a goal, or made that as a goal under our climate framework emergency plan. And so I think that that's one place that we really are going to have to collaborate as the county and at least our city and hopefully all the others in the county in order to get there, because we have a lot of work to do and not much time to get it done. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Barrett. Welcome, Supervisor Rabbit. My couple of thoughts. The racial and the climate goals seem like they were more internal, and I don't know whether that was intentional, whether it was more focused on the internally, but it was a lot of diversity and staffing and things like that. I think there's a role to play in just being anti-racist generally in the community. The others were in the resilient infrastructure. I think it's good to make sure we look at Petaluma as a city and the people here and the fairgrounds as part of the county's resilient infrastructure. And then the final comment was, I was just wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about what the county is looking at in terms of potential for stimulus funding, and if and how there's some ways that the city and the county could work together on some of those things, in particular to advance climate, green infrastructure, resilient infrastructure. And I'm just wondering, maybe those are already happening and I'm just not aware of them, but I think sort of on the front of my mind right now is being ready for any sort of federal money coming.
Yeah, I mean, from the county's perspective, the CARES Act, of which we received about 54.2 million, was really directly COVID related. There was some dollars that we did do, small business grants, some aid, the Cura, which is really a stipend program for those that are quarantined, to make sure that they're not going destitute or while they're losing work. We're ready to launch into another about $14 million out of our own general fund. So this isn't really stimulus dollars. This is really county dollars. One program that we had that became kind of moot when we settled with PG&E after the 17 fires was an infrastructure sinking fund. And when I was last chair, we actually put $5 million aside to satisfy some, there was a concern over some of the roads that FEMA was fighting us on that needed to be paved sooner than later. And we were still trying to get FEMA to pay for them because we thought that was their responsibility due to the fires. But now that PG&E has paid those dollars, we can shift those back over. We chose to shift them to this the COVID package that we've been dealing with coming forward. And then all the other dollars really have been sunk into testing, vaccine rollout. Like I said, it's been nothing but interesting moving pieces around to make sure that we have enough dollars to cover ourselves going forward. I don't know what the 1.9 trillion holds yet at the local level and what that will be outside of what will be needed for COVID. I can tell you this year, interestingly enough, on our overall budget, this year we're looking okay. Next year the deficit starts and rolls a little bit up and down because of a couple of things that happened in the interim. But over the next 5 years in our projected budget, we're in the red to about $30 million or so. So we obviously have to still maintain that fiscal discipline. At the county, over that amount, over a 5-year period of time, you can probably correct course in the interim, but it means that you're not going to have additional dollars. And you're not, certainly the cumulative impact of disasters in this county has been significant. And, when FEMA reimburses you, they don't reimburse you typically 100%. You're always losing some dollars somewhere, somehow, not to mention productivity and services. Excuse me. So it is always difficult. I would love if there was truly a stimulus package that we could have and really have discretionary dollars, but it doesn't seem to be the case too often. It's usually directed towards something of, in this county lately, a crisis at hand. That crisis right now is COVID and the response to it.
Thank you. Councilmember Posake?
Thanks, Teresa. Thank you, Supervisor, for the presentation. My question's pretty much been answered, but I just wanted to put an exclamation point, I suppose, after some of the other questions that we're looking for county and city collaboration around cahoots, around ILARO, other things. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. And Councilmember King?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and welcome Supervisor Rabbit and county staff. I appreciated the presentation. I really only have 2 comments beyond what's been said. With respect to the strategic plan, and I may forward some additional comments. I'd hope the county would examine a couple of areas relating to both climate and transportation around battery storage for electricity and EV charging stations as part of the transportation infrastructure. I think that's where we're headed if we have climate goals as we do for 2030 in terms of changing how we travel. So those are my comments on the strategic plan. With regard to Measure O, and I have to confess, I'm not fully versed on all the funding that might be available, but one thing to consider that would tie into some of the policing discussion that we had here and probably in some other cities is to see whether some of the Measure O money can be directed to mental health services for public safety workers, police and fire. They see a lot. They're under a lot of stress. Some of the things they see are just simply horrific, and I'm sure it has effects on many of them that create a situation where they could use some help. So those would be something I would hope that the board would consider. And I appreciate again you taking the time. I don't envy where you've been the last I don't even know how many months at this point, 18. 20 with one crisis after another. It hasn't been easy to be in local government the last year or so. But thank you all.
Thank you, and I think we all share that. Obviously, it's not optimum times by any by any stretch of the imagination, but we will get through this. And actually, with the rollout of the vaccine, even though it's not on a full glide path yet. At least there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we just need to be a little more patient, make sure that we're doing our jobs to make sure we can get it out to all those people. I do appreciate your speaking up regarding what a difficult job that we do ask our police officers and sheriff's deputies to perform. They as I've heard before, they interface with people who could be having the worst day of their lives, and they do that way too often. They also see more than they, I know through my own son, you see things that you just can't get out of your eyes, and you have to deal with that, and you have to be able to kind of keep that in its place, and it's a very difficult thing. So we also ask them to be therapists, counselors, social workers, and so much more. California now has PTSD as presumptive for law enforcement for that reason. And I know Petaluma is certainly not immune to these issues. I can tell you at the sheriff's office, and I think Petaluma Police Department would have similar services and programs available. The day-to-day peer support programs, I think, are significant. I know after a significant event, a clinician is brought in and there's a debrief for all those who were involved so they can talk and discuss things. I know we just did that at the county after the drownings of the children at the coast. I think there's also lengthier programs. I know that there's the West Coast Trauma Retreat, which is, I think, a live-in program for 10 or 14 days. And I think every large organization has a EAP or employee assistance program. I know here at the county, we are trying to work on ours and revise ours to really reflect first responder issues, because it, sometimes it's trying to really hone in on those issues that they're seeing and have it be a little more specialized for that. But I know, talking to Petaluma Police, that these issues are important to them as well. They should be. And we need to make sure that we can continue to afford to provide them. And I think, as we've all seen, the number of instances of that assistance being offered is increasing over time. So it's something we all need to be aware of, make sure that we, as good employers and as good leaders within the community, can continue to offer. And I realize it comes with a cost, but that's a cost that I think we all need to bear. Measure O is, again, I'll be looking at the expenditure to make sure that we put aside those dollars that we need to make sure that we have the best out there. I think it goes hand in hand with ILERO as well. It's important to take care of everyone's well-being, so that that they're always going to be at their best and best in performance. So I appreciate the the comment.
Thank you. And Council Member McDonald wants a second round here.
Well, thank you very
Can
much.
I interrupt and provide a response to another question that
Of
Councilmember King had?
Of course.
So you had asked about the EV charging stations and the battery storage. There's if you look at the climate goal 4, objective 3, the EV charging stations. It's about updating all of the county-owned EV charging infrastructure. And then the battery storage goal 2, objectives 2 and 3 talk about community programs that would enhance green building technologies, which could include solar and battery storage. So those are addressed in the climate pillar.
Thank you for that. Okay, now Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you very much. Going first, I didn't want to monopolize everything. It is appreciated that you're here to ask questions of and to follow up on Councilman Barnacle's suggestion about stimulus issues. If SMART has access to that, and I know you have a linkage there, that those bike paths and other projects that are SMART projects in Petaluma sure would be nice to get on the stimulus lists. And then the second part is, county's been kind of hit hard with increased RENA numbers for the next cycle. How do we assure, what do we need to do to follow up with county that the good housing county needs to do isn't in our open spaces and urban growth areas and causing problems in this arena? How do those blend? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great point. Certainly on SMART, I look forward to continuing to collaborate with you, Kevin, and with all of you, and to make sure that we can fill in those pieces of missing segments that we have. A lot of that has to do with whether it's a NEPA project or a CEQA project or both, all the different issues. Obviously, paths are more expensive than you think, anywhere from $2 upwards to $6 million a mile, based upon the mitigations that and the areas that you're going through. And unfortunately, I will tell you that, for better or worse, right? Railroads were always elevated, so everything on the downhill side now is a wetland, which means you have to deal with that. I will also tell you, it's interesting. There's some legal challenges coming out nationwide on the use of different use of railroad right-of-ways. So stay tuned for that, because that only adds another wrinkle into something that is already a difficult enough challenge to overcome. You're absolutely right regarding the RENA numbers. I've been on ABAG for years, and now ABAG and MTC. I wasn't on the methodology committee, but I know I followed it closely. And I don't know if you know, Jane Riley just retired from the county. She was our housing guru and very well versed in all things RENA and all things affordable housing. Those numbers for the county did go up considerably. I believe every chance I got at ABAG, I did voice my opinion. They did change some of the numbers. They're less than where they once were. They changed some of the methodology. Some of our numbers will be absorbed into the sphere of influence in and around the city of Santa Rosa, Roseland, think of that area, and some of those more dense areas. The problem is that if you look at the 9-county Bay Area, we're kind of unique in so many ways by having very distinct cities with urban growth boundaries, green belts, a 1/4-cent sales tax. I said this over and over to my colleagues on ABAG to really try to drive the point home about the RENA numbers, and that the last thing we want to do is to counteract what we're trying to do on the Sustainable Community Strategy or Plan Bay Area 2050 by then promoting sprawl in areas of the county. It's based upon previous numbers, so it's an interesting conundrum that we're dealing with. The last thing we also want to do is to have a city of Petaluma, for instance, feather out to the outskirts and then all of a sudden, have more high dense development in areas. Plus, we don't have, quite frankly, services. And those areas that have services for any kind of dense development are few and far between. Larkfield, Wikia, it might be a little different. The Springs might be a little different. And perhaps certain places in the urbanized Russian River area and or the airport area. And we did take a look at the final numbers, and they were satisfied that we can accomplish those within the county. I know Healdsburg got hit hard at the last minute by an equity component that really, I argued to have that switched as well, because they basically have to build 10% of the entire housing stock in the city over the next 8-year period of time, which is a challenge. And even San Francisco, I had 2 calls from 2 supervisors in San Francisco who are challenging the equity component as well. So this RHNA cycle will be challenging. It'll be, it's not just kind of zoning a piece of property, counting it as job done, and you don't have to worry about it. You can only zone it for that particular unit once. So I think it has some teeth to it. I can tell you that I am the chair of the Housing, Land Use, and Transportation Committee of the California State Association of Counties, and next week we do have a Zoom call with Scott Wiener, and he's chair of on the Senate side of the Housing Committee. So we'll be talking about these issues. I do think probably in the near future, some of these things will come to a head. I'm not sure if it'll be 8 years for RHNA, but I think we're going to have to kind of figure out what it is we're doing and how we're doing it within California. Really, if you look at Plan Bay Area, we can get to Plan Bay Area, but the mitigations involved to meet the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals within a Bay Area, excuse me, a Bay Area that has been developed the way it is, anticipating the growth that's on top, makes it very challenging. 60% telecommute. I mean, will that happen? Probably not, but that's in the plan in order to get to that point. All lane tolling on Highway 101. Don't know how that's going to roll out politically. Well, I think I do know how that will roll out politically, but that's a pretty draconian measure that I'm not sure if the general public is really going to be jumping up and down about. But that's how you get to 19% reduction within the Bay Area in the way that we've already been developed, I should say, and to be able to add the housing units that we need to be able to add. And that goes back to the RHNA numbers, and I think that's why we need to really kind of figure that out together. And I've been telling our state legislatures, both of our senators and our assembly members, that, and I know MTC has it on their legislative platform this year, to look at what we're going to be doing with SB 375 going forward. The last thing we want to do is to not meet our goals, because then we won't get, obviously, the funding. Not only do we want to meet our greenhouse goals for the world's sake, we also need to meet it to be able to get the dollars back to get the programs like the bicycle paths, like all the other things. And it's a kind of a catch-22 that isn't necessarily in a good place right now. So it's worked well in the first 2 cycles. This last one it's a little more challenging, but I think we need to really kind of incorporate this in an integral approach going forward to really make a difference on how we look at things, how we can achieve our goals, accommodate growth, because it's going to occur, anyway, and really make sure that we don't make things worse as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, and to the staff, Catherine. And we didn't get to hear from you, Crystal, but I'm sure if we had called on you, you would have been able to answer any questions we had. So I think Councilmember King said these are tough times, and there are a lot of issues that need to be solved now because we didn't solve them earlier. And of course, then there's new issues that just popped up. So, okay, so thank you so much for this. And we appreciate the strategic plan presentation, and I hope that you will get responses from people in Petaluma. And David, thank you so much for your presentation, and I'm sure you will get responses from people.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you all very much. And I got to say, Catherine and Crystal are aces, always great public servants, and thank them very much. And Dennis, I'm so sorry to hear for your loss. I just learned that. So my condolences there as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, we're on now to general public comment. And I'm going to ask our city clerk if she has received any general public comment.
Mayor Barrett, we received one public comment that's posted to the website with the agenda packet.
Okay, thank you. And now I will ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in the public in attendance who would like to speak at today's meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you are interested in making a general public comment, please raise your hand in Zoom now. I'm going to share my screen and start a 30-second timer. And we'll divide the time between those who have had their hands raised by the end of that timer, 3 minutes if there are 7 or fewer, or 2 minutes if there are 8 or more hands raised. Those who had not raised their hand by the end of the timer and wish to make a general public comment may submit an email to the city clerk at cityclerk@cityofpetaluma.org. So during general public comment, the public is invited to make comments on items of public interest that are within the city council's subject matter jurisdiction and are not listed on the current agenda. Speakers are encouraged to be respectful. Obscenity and threats of violence are grounds for removal from the meeting. At this point, we have 12 hands raised, and that means I will reset our timer for 2 minutes and share my screen again. All right, so the first speaker is Everly, followed by Scott Springhorn. Everly, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Sorry to have to bring this back to the local level, but I want to talk about things that are more immediately actionable. 2 years ago, Petaluma adopted a wireless ordinance which prevents small 5G towers from being placed in residential neighborhoods. Now's the time to update our ordinance to provide more needed protections for everyone in Petaluma. It was great that we blocked small cell towers in neighborhoods, but we need to do the obvious and not allow macro facilities with huge antennas to be placed next to homes. Currently, the city is not keeping updated information about where our cell towers are, what radiation they're emitting, or what antennas are up there. This is important information residents need to know. These antennas are built to blend in from an aesthetic standpoint, but that also allows them to be stealthy about where they are located. So your house may have antennas radiating you from different directions and you have no clue. We need to require the telecom companies to provide us with this information and keep it updated. While federal law prevents us from using environmental or health concerns to block cell towers, there are measures we can take to get what we want and not have it forced on us. To help the city write the smartest ordinance possible requires unbiased advice. We cannot expect this from companies like telecom law firm, whose business is to advance the interest of the telecom industry. This same company has a sister LLC that makes money helping to site even more cell towers. One of their principals, Dr. Kramer, gives seminars to the wireless industry on how to streamline cell tower deployments. Is this really the company we want advising us on writing our ordinance? When the city of Malibu learned of this conflict and other issues with telecom law firm, whom they had been using for 3 years, they had the wisdom to avoid their contract. When we look to our own future, we could use the expertise of our own city attorneys, but it would be prudent to hire an attorney with in-depth knowledge of the ever-evolving and complex laws dealing with wireless facilities. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Everly. The next speaker is Scott Springhorn, followed by Julie Allen. Scott, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Thank you. The city must not hire a telecom law firm who have a reputation for misguiding cities into compromising their legal rights. In an October 13th, 2020 email sent from the Petaluma city staff to Trip May, who's one of the principals of telecom law firm, there was a conversation they would go about how to help the city strengthen its ordinance. In the last paragraph, it reads the following: in a subject matter where neither the council, the residents, nor the industry will be totally satisfied by whatever regulations the city proposes to adopt, a more flexible regulatory structure tends to make everyone feel better about not getting everything they hope for. This company is telling the city that they will not be satisfied or get what they are hoping for. He is also making a statement that this city will need to take into account for what the wireless companies want. No, they have no part in how we write our ordinances, nor should they be part of this process. This email just shows how telecom law firm is trying to give their wireless industry an opportunity to be involved. This flexibility that he is talking about is what allows wireless companies the opportunity to come in and do what they want. This is a conflict of interest for sure. This cannot happen. This is exactly what happened in South Lake Tahoe. They hired Trip May and Terracom law firm, and they weakened their current ordinances, and now they have small cell sites everywhere in their residential area. This council cannot allow the city to work with this company. We ask again that city not hire or stop working with telecom law firm. They are not interested in what is best for us, only making it more flexible and easier for wireless companies to come in and do what they want. Again, how can the city work with a company that has been fired by other cities for undoing strong ordinances so that they favor the wireless companies? If the city knows this information, how are we still working with them? This is all about what is best for the city, nothing less. Why would the city allow this company in its past of bad faith all over the country still work for us? Hire Andrew Campanelli or another professional company who has a proven track record of protecting the city and its residents first. Petaluma deserves the best to get us the greatest and strongest protection under the law.
Thank you for your comments, Scott. Sorry I had to cut you off a little bit early. Your time had run out. Julie Allen is next, followed by Wendy Denny. Julie Allen, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Thank you. The city must not hire telecom law firm who have a reputation for misguiding cities into compromising their legal rights. Don't let telecom law firm do to Petaluma what they did to Orinda, Monterey, South Lake Tahoe, Seaside, Piedmont, and other places throughout the country. In all of those communities, Trip May and telecom law firm have been misleading cities and decision makers to undo and weaken current ordinances to make it more flexible for the wireless companies to come in and do what they want. Most of these cities were unaware of how telecom law firm really works and how they are very connected to the wireless companies. Their principal owners are former wireless employees that have a record for giving very favorable ordinances to their friends, the wireless companies. The only reason that telecom law firm has not weakened all ordinances is because of the citizens, city staff, and city councils who have seen through their untruthful ways and have called them out. The city council has the power to approve and deny these ordinances. Telecom law firm will try to bully you into thinking you will get sued unless you do what they say. The great news is that our city staff and council now know what this group can and will try to do. You need to stop this from moving forward. You need to make sure our city gets what we want in our ordinances and deny anything that is not what we want. Most importantly, do not succumb to their false pressure of lawsuits. The easiest thing to do is to hire Andrew Campanelli or other companies that are actually independent and want to protect the city and its residences while still giving telecom companies opportunities to do business in least intrusive and appropriate places outlined in our strong ordinances. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Julie Allen. Next speaker is Wendy Denny. You may unmute yourself and begin speaking. And sorry, after Wendy Denny is Alexander.
Hello, and thank you. Telecom law firm has questionable conflicts of interest and is a bad choice for the city to hire. Some of the conflicts are TLF is a licensed telecommunications contractor for over 30 years, and the company submits bids and does the work of installing or maintaining telecom systems. They actively promote training videos for 5G installers and teach techniques to counteract communities in opposition to 5G. They are quoted saying, "Build as fast as possible, as cheaply as possible. Your duty is not to the community, your duty is to the shareholders you're contracting with," end quote. They have misled Malibu City Council regarding cell tower placements on fire stations. Quote, "Right now with the deployment of FirstNet, we're seeing wireless facilities going into fire stations for specifically the purpose it's near where they want the coverage to be," end quote. Here they are referring to what telecom companies want and not the firefighters who fought for 2 years against FirstNet. So what is the purpose of TLF making the statement when they were hired to help the public sector? Another example of TLF's muddled conduct testimony from Ms. Foster at Malibu City Council meeting, quote, "I would like to address Council member Ms. Ferrari's question of telecom law firm, TLF was asked whether or not the firefighters had received an exemption, and TLF said no. That is not the whole truth. There is a minor exemption for fire stations in AB 57, which did pass and signed into law, was passed by Governor Brown, end quote. Was TLF unaware of AB 57 and the LA firefighters fight? Is this incompetence or a purposely misleading tactic? Our city needs to help from an honest expert in telecom law, not an established company that financially benefits from the installation of cell towers and has questionable interpretations of telecom.
Sorry, Wendy, I'm having to cut your comments off right there, but thank you for them. Next speaker is Alexander, followed by Andrea Jean. Alexander, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Evening all. My name is Alex DeCarli, and I'm speaking on behalf of my family and all the other old families that are from Petaluma, Sonoma, and Marin County. Last week, the city council was asked by the fairgrounds to give them a 1-year extension to get more community support and, dive further into renewing their lease. And that was not given by the city council. So myself and many others, we think that that needs to be heard. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments tonight, Alexander. Next speaker is Andrea Jean, followed by John Hanania. Andrea, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Good evening. Last year, when the city and the Fair Board came together to kick off the fair planning process, it was understood by the community and the committee that the fair had 2 years left with its lease, and during that time, the community would be able to partake in a thorough public engagement. Now the time we were provided has been cut in half. Extending the lease an additional year would allow the community to be able to conduct a thorough public engagement in formulating the vision for the fairground's future. Time is essential in including and coordinating our community members and stakeholders. Taking that away is rushing the process. It is important that in the rush, we don't overlook or hinder our diverse community, some of which may not have adequate internet, adequate transportation, and may have disability issues. The request to extend the lease was to ensure that we, the people, get to interact and participate in providing our input and visions for the future of the fairgrounds. This extension was to benefit the community who has been waiting to start the process since last year. This is not a decision for the city's benefit so much as for the community. Without this extension, the community is the one mostly losing. However, the lack of an extension may not be in the best interest of the city, in my opinion. It was very clear last city council meeting that there is no plan on how the city can fiscally manage or find the public manpower to maintain the fairgrounds. This is a problem the city will have to confront as soon as that lease ends, and they have no idea how they can handle it, as it was apparent during the last meeting. So why not extend the lease 1 year? We need another year to make up for the loss of time we should have had. This planning process is important to so many, and we know that rushing such a heavy item will only cause us to fall. This process needs time to be responsible, thorough, and meaningful. Remember, the outcome of this process will not only impact Petaluma, but so many other outlying communities and groups that have long depended upon it. Please reconsider extending the lease 1 year. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Andrea. The next speaker is John Hanania, followed by Joe Zepp. John, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Good evening. First, my condolences to the council members, Puseke and Fisher, for their loss. I spoke with several of the council members last week, but I would like to address one thing, my conversation with Mr. King. I'm very disappointed with the conversation for two reasons. Mr. King is under the impression that I have been responded to. I hate to tell you, someone in the staff is blowing smoke up your behind. What I like to say, and I do believe, in law school, they teach the difference between hearsay and a fact. I submitted a complaint, a letter with 2 questions after the police department have changed their outcome from the investigation that was done by Sonoma County Sheriff. I have never, ever, ever received a response. That's one of many. So, Mr. King, I'm going to make a wager for you. That's going to make everybody so happy. You show me that I got response to that one individual, I'll move out of town. You don't find it, you resign and move out of town. This is only one of many, many, many response that I never got. And there's many requests for respond for other items that I've never received. If the mentality that's taking place currently, if do as I say, not as I do. When that happens, you take democracy and you throw it down the street. There's no longer democracy if you are not willing to lead by example. I hope to hear from you, Mr. King, before the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments tonight, John. Next speaker is Joe Zepp, followed by Samantha Buller. Joe, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me? Okay,
yes, we can.
I wanted to discuss the fair and training discussion about the fairgrounds and the extension of the lease. It was imperative that the decision is given the time to properly express our concerns, so that the decision is what the people in the community want, rather than just what the city council believes is best for their needs. We need to extend the lease in order to have the public outreach and discussions as promised by the city council last January in the meeting. I think it was a great meeting that we had last January, and it was never followed through by the city. And it was discussed in the city council meeting, last meeting, that the city did not have the staff due to COVID to go through these meetings. And I think that it's necessary that we need to go through the meetings and hear the public concerns. Many of us signed up to be part of the public outreach, but during the past year, we were never notified of any meetings, and we were never notified of even the city council agenda item to extend this lease. We would like to have our voices heard along with everyone else's. It's important to hear from the community. The city council does not always stand for all of the community, even though they believe they do. I think it needs to be open to the public discussion. I hope you all have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments tonight, Joe. Next speaker is Samantha Buller, followed by Taryn Obaid. Samantha, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Thank you. The city must not hire telecom law firm who has a reputation for misguiding cities into compromising their legal rights. Now is the time for the city of Petaluma to review and strengthen our wireless ordinances. As the city and its businesses continue to evolve, so should these ordinances. Wireless companies will continue to come in and flood towns and cities with towers so they can make millions of dollars each month. Over the last 5 months, citizens have been asking the city to hire Andrew Campanelli to come in, review, strengthen, educate, and ensure that the city is protected from these wireless companies. City staff will not tell us if they have been working with the telecom law firm to help them rewrite our wireless ordinances. We can only deduce that this is the case. This company is the absolute wrong decision. The company is directly involved with wireless companies and has been hired, then fired from multiple cities for undoing strong ordinances to benefit wireless companies. The exact definition of a conflict of interest. In emails from the city and TLF, there are statements regarding not all parties will be, quote, totally satisfied, and ways to, quote, make everyone feel better about not getting what they want. How is this acceptable? We ask again for you to hire Andrew Campanelli or another company to provide Petaluma with a wireless ordinance that is lawsuit strong, safety and service balanced, money saving, revenue generating, and best for our city and residences. If telecom industry aligned telecom law firm is hired, they will work hard to undo all of the hard work that this city did in 2018 to ban small cells from residential areas. Do not let them do this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments tonight, Samantha. Next speaker is Taryn Obaid, followed by Shalina. Taryn, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Citizens have been asking the city to hire Andrew Campanelli because we believe Petaluma deserves the very best. Citizens have been imploring the city not to hire a telecom law firm due to its reputation of misguiding cities out of their legal rights. The city must not hire a law firm that is in the pockets of big telecom, nor one that is known for swindling cities out of their rights through pumping up the threat of big lawsuits and getting everyone running around parroting the false mantra, "We have no right to approve cell towers. Our hands are tied." By the way, that's telecom law's signature. Getting everyone running around parroting that their hands are tied. Petalumans want a reputable, public rights-focused attorney. Also, we do not want telecom law firm due to their conflict of interest of working for cell tower developers. In a recent video, telecom law revealed their conflict of interest when talking with a group of wireless tower developers, telling them, quote, "Don't use the term radiation," saying to them, quote, "Although radiation is technically, absolutely the most accurate word, please stop using it. We call radiation the R word. And to us, the R word is the F word because it makes our job when working with a city planning department, it makes our job, which is to get your cell towers approved, much more difficult." Finally, they assure them that we're on your side. Your duty is not to the community, it is to shareholders. And if that's not enough, that they're not right for Petaluma, they refer to radon pole antennas as tampons.
Thank you for your comments, Taryn. Next speaker is Shalina, followed by Paul G., who will be our last speaker tonight. Shalina, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Hi, thank you. This is Shalina Moreta. I am a founder of NorCal Livestock Evacuation. We are just one organization who uses the fairgrounds to house hundreds of animals during the fires. We would not have had any public locations within a 3-hour turnaround in the last fire if we did not have the Petaluma Fairgrounds. The center of the fairgrounds got evacuated, and we actually had to evacuate the animals out of there as well. I was happy to hear that wildfires are getting a little more attention in the plan. Thank you for that. We would like to see the council vote on the extension, and we'd like to see this extension put through so that everyone in the community can give valuable input like we had planned on doing pre-COVID. I attended the meeting and was looking forward to the public outreach being followed through. I thought that that was also a very good meeting. Just because we can't meet in person doesn't mean that this is no longer important. You're eliminating an entire group of people who may not have access to technology like the rest of us. Latino families who utilize the property, elderly folks who had a part in it, and people who live on the outskirts without great internet access. The uses of the fairgrounds, even now, are very complex, so the community input will be multifaceted and should not be rushed. We want to feel like this is a community thing, especially during this time. I think it's really important to use the opportunity to make the community feel involved. We've all kind of had that stripped away from us through COVID. And so taking this opportunity, a central location that the community uses, taking the opportunity to voice our concerns about it would be taking one more thing away from the community. So I urge you to reconsider that and go ahead with the extension. Thank you guys so much for your time tonight.
Thank you for those comments, Shalina. The last speaker is Paul G., and I see one other hand raised after that. If you'd like to let the council know your comments, please send them in an email to cityclerk@cityofpetaluma.org. So Paul, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
I test and affirm the following is true and accurate in my personal knowledge. Listen, the decision is clear. Telecom law firm is not a good choice. Trip May, I know from personal experience, is slick. He sounds intelligent and charming, but his goals are clear. It's to mislead you and walk you down his path. We've bumped into him in Thousand Oaks, Sacramento, Napa, Piedmont, South Lake Tahoe. All have ended up in lawsuits stretching a year or longer. Jonathan Kramer has spun lie after lie in Thousand Oaks. This is all tied up in the FCC right now because he lies when he says wireless telecommunications facilities don't need to go through NEPA review. That is just not true. The two cities that actually turned around and said, we're not going to listen to Trip May, that would be Monterey and Seaside, were smart. And they went against Trip May's recommendations, denied Verizon's towers, and did not get sued. Now let's consider a 2017 GovTech.com article. Cincinnati creates a smart city platform with telecom law firm. Here the article says, broadband engineer Jonathan Kramer, an attorney at LA Telecom Law Firm, which is advising Cincinnati, the project has the potential to bridge the digital divide. Quote, using the rail analogy, we want to bring the high-speed trains into Cincinnati. This is a great place to try out interesting ideas. That's their goal. We're the guinea pigs for the industry's interesting ideas. There is no good reason to continue to just look the other way regarding the obvious conflicts of interest and possible corruption involved in the whole process of identifying and hiring telecom law firm. Who made this selection and why? Peggy Flynn? Eric Danley? Heather Hines? Was the public consulted? Respected in any way? Well, we can't get an answer to the CPRA request. Yeah, Danley's trying to say that the hiring is perfected information. Come on, folks. This has to stop.
Sorry to cut you off there, Paul. That your 2 minutes was up, and Madam Mayor, those were all the hands that were raised at the end of the 30-second timer. So those that still have their hands, please send your emails to cityclerk@cityofpetaluma.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And with that, we're going to close public comment. And I think our city attorney wanted to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, before we continue with the rest of the meeting, I think it may be helpful for me to touch base on a couple points. One of the main ones is that it seems that like a number of the speakers we heard from tonight may be of the view that that outside consultants that we may retain somehow our policy makers on behalf of the city. They're not. Staff even are not. It's the council that are our legislative body and our policymakers. And when we put together teams of experts, as we are constantly in the process of doing on the full and broad range of issues that the city must address, we do not give up our responsibility for the staff recommendations to the city council. So that there's no abdication of our role. And for my part, I'm personally responsible for the legal recommendations that go to this council and for the results that we achieve on behalf of the community under the council's direction. And that'll continue to be the case. That was the case when we last updated our telecommunications regulations in the city, and that will be the case when we next update them, which we're about to embark upon doing. And for my part, and we've actually heard favorable responses from many of the members of the public regarding the latest recommendation of the staff and the result with respect to the Verizon application. And we're confident about the lawfulness of that recommendation. And the record is clear in terms of the Verizon withdrawal. So it's my commitment personally to make sure that we continue to work with the rest of staff and whatever outside advisor teams we've deployed to assist us, to make sure that the council is in a position to update its regulations as it sees fit, exercising its authority to the maximum extent possible that it wishes to, and that it can do so that in a way that comports with the existing law. So that's always our commitment, and certainly my commitment, and that's not going to change. So if there are council questions about that, I'd be happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, City Attorney. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up, but we are moving into council comments, so maybe someone will have a comment during their time to speak. And we'll start with Mr. Healy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So 2 liaison reports. The Petaluma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency met last Thursday. We're going to have a busy year. Our groundwater sustainability plan is due to the state in January of next year. And there are several different elements of that will be coming forward. There should be a draft plan that will be available for the City Council's review in the fall. But we'll be quite busy between now and then. The Water Advisory Committee met this morning. A few things to report there. The reservoir levels are not where we would like them to be. Lake Sonoma is, the water supply pool is 64% of capacity. Lake Mendocino is 41%, and Lake Pillsbury is 36%. And as a result of Lake Pillsbury's level, PG&E is requesting permission to reduce diversions through Potter Valley to Lake Mendocino. And because of that, the temporary urgency order request is into the state to reduce stream flows in the northern Russian River below Lake Mendocino from 75 cubic feet per second to 25 cubic feet per second to retain the water that's up there for water purposes. The other thing I can pass along, just a preview of coming attractions. Council members who've been here for a while know that the water agency's wholesale rates are a creature of the restructured agreement between the Sonoma County Water Agency and the City of Petaluma and all the other retailers. We're looking at this point at a 4% wholesale rate increase in the middle of the year for water rates coming from Sonoma Water. So those are my reports for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you very much. On the liaison reports, the Petaluma Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee hasn't met, meets Wednesday. And the North Bay Watershed Association, my other liaison, is meeting Friday. Busy week, but did want to drop in that I attended the 2021 Economic Perspectives, the Sonoma Economic Development Board annual meeting, and amongst the COVID discussion and business crisis discussion, there was a lot of focus on childcare and how it's been devastated through the COVID period. And for that to be one of the keynotes of this year's meeting, shows the significance. Not that there's any particular solutions being offered there, but the real crisis in the childcare arena is front of a lot of people's minds. Also attended the Liaison status of COVID and race equity presentations this past week. Liaison always does the best presentations. It's always a treat to see their what they bring forth monthly. But this week was about the CDC. The CDC brought in their all-star cast, all-woman cast, Supervisor Hopkins, Barbie Robinson, Dr. Sonari Mays, Sheba Whitley from the Economic Development Board, and their county's equity officer. Just a real all-star cast to talk about where the county is on these issues through a Latinx lens. So there was some real highlights in there, one of them being the Promotores model, where lay Latinx are trained to provide medical information into the community to better make people aware of how COVID's transmission works and best practices to not have it transmit. So a lot of good from that group. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no liaison reports for tonight's meeting. My committees and boards meet later in the week. I did want to just say rest in peace to Jim Harbison. Served 25 years as an elected official, and including the city council and as our representative on the board of supervisors. I also, unfortunately, we can't do this live. Send my condolences to council members Postica and Fisher on their losses. I'm very sorry for your loss. And then I guess my last comment is that I will not be resigning or moving. So I'll leave it at that. And I'm fairly sure entering a wager from the dais of a public meeting probably violates some California law. I'm not sure which one, but I'm sure at least one. So that's my report for the evening.
And if it doesn't, it should. So with that, we're on to Vice Mayor Barnacle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll echo Councilmember King and the condolences for Councilmember Fisher and Postica. It's hard news to hear, and thank you for being here and serving. Had more orientations since our last meeting. I haven't had any other meetings, but had my final trainings with the League of California Cities last week. Had a meeting with Marie Matusker on the Downtown Association today. Learned some interesting facts and stories about that organization. Really interesting and excited to be part of it. City of Santa Rosa got some good news on their reach code ordinance that should give us some comfort in moving forward with ours. Also, the city of San Carlos became the 42nd city to adopt a reach code banning natural gas. I want to just say to the public who's on here, we need to start spending our money at local businesses. That means local restaurants, local stores. Please stop going to chains. It's really hard to see In-N-Out being so successful at a time when our local restaurants are all hurting. I would like to see people stop spending money at chains and at In-N-Out and spending money locally. I'm really excited to see our first parklet, our first permanent parklet installed this weekend, and I'd love to see us continue that. And I'm happy that our city took the leap and made those permanent. I'm appreciative of the Downtown Association, Petaluma Arts Center, and all the people who've made those happen, and look forward to seeing more. I was hoping we could get an update on the fairgrounds. I agree. I think it was Andrea Jean who made the comment that we don't have a plan. We don't have a plan. And I'd like to have to see that back in front of the council soon so that we know what would our plan be and what the options would be, because I think we definitely owe it to the community to have a plan if we're going to be moving forward with anything on that. On the telecom law firm, I do have some questions. Mostly if they are in construction, that would concern me. I looked at their website. I didn't see that they're in construction, but they do have transactions and regulatory as their two services, and I would be interested in understanding the split between those. And if they spend, make a lot more of their revenue on transactions than regulatory, that would give me some pause. I also encourage the people who spoke about telecom law firm that if they have proof of the videos or anything like that, please send them, because some of those accusations would be cause for concern. And finally, I just want to, I'm feeling that we need to start thinking more holistically about our unhoused population. Right now it's starting to rain and there's people all over our city that are sleeping outside in tents and being pushed around. And I appreciate Supervisor Rabbit talking about getting them in houses, but I don't necessarily think that all of them even want to be in houses. I don't think that, I think what they want is somewhere where they're secure, from what I've been hearing, secure, somewhere where they can put their trash, somewhere where they can go to the bathroom. And that is something that I think we can provide in short order. And it's, I'm seeing more and more on social media and getting emails where members of our community are expressing anger toward our unhoused population. And I don't like that there's this animosity that's building and people are pitting, are getting upset against, they're feeling frustrated about things that we can do something about, I feel like. And I would like to see us start taking action or at least having the discussion and, maybe having a special workshop on it or something. But I think we need to start doing more for that, because what we're doing right now is not enough. And so that's my report out, and look forward to the next meeting.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Fisher, City Manager, I'm sorry, Council Member Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have one liaison assignment report, and that is that the Planning Commission met last week. I had my first meeting there, and we did address the ban on fossil fuel stations, which will be coming before this body next week. And before I burst out into tears, I want to say that I agree with Councilmember Vice Mayor Barnacle, and I have mentioned this to the city manager in our meetings, that I really do think we need to provide space for the unhoused who don't necessarily want to be in the COTS program, but do want a place to lie their head that is secure and safe. And I don't know how we do that, but I'm absolutely supportive of that. And in terms of the comments from the public on the fairgrounds, I don't think that our decision not to extend the lease that doesn't end for 2 more years will affect the public process at all. I don't think we're taking away your voice by making that decision. And I just want to make that really clear, that process will continue regardless of the lease. Thank you.
Thank you. And Council Member Posake.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a liaison meeting with the Youth Commission at which we made additional plans for their project for this semester, which has to do with developing a website related to what helps teens deal with stress during COVID and beyond. And also that moved on to thinking about some sort of arts good-natured competition between folks from all types of art to contribute that to a community endeavor. Beyond that, I'd like to also thank the Petaluma Blacks for Community Development for their current project, which it's been great to see. And finally, I'd like to also third what Brian said about our homeless population.
Thank you very much. And my council comments are the Library Advisory Board, of which I am the liaison, met, and Petaluma branch continues to be the highest number of users of books in the county, which we now have 2 days of picking up and returning books. And I just think that speaks, and no pun intended, volumes about our community. And also there has been an 80% increase in during the pandemic on ebook rentals through the library. So that's actually a wonderful thing, that people are expanding their ability to access books in who don't feel like they can get out to pick them up at the actual library. The 7th annual LumaCon happened this past Saturday, and it was, of course, a virtual event this year. But I just think it really shows that even in the pandemic, if you really want to get something done, you can do it, and you work with your community and you make it happen. And I certainly know that that's what our staff has been doing through the pandemic. And it's really nice to see how well our library has been working under such difficult situations. I also was able to attend virtually, of course, the Sonoma County economic state of the county presentation that Councilmember McDonald referred to. And I thought the important takeaway from that was that recovery starts when the pandemic ends. And it was really an important message, I think, that our supervisor just had mentioned about the problems with the rollout of the vaccine. And he's right, that there were problems, and there probably will continue to be. But the point is that there's going to be more and more vaccine available, and we really do need to take advantage of that, because the more people are vaccinated, the more we will get people feeling comfortable going out, going to these businesses. The workers will be vaccinated, and we will get this economy back on its feet. Dr. Jerry Nickelberg, the presenter, also mentioned that Sonoma County was probably going to recover faster than California in general, and that they expected personal income to go up 5 to 9%. They expect housing sales have gone through the roof of existing housing, and so they expect that to be an impetus for all housing development of all economic levels. And also they expect employment to increase 4 to 6% here in the 21-22 period. So, it's good news. It's still out a while, but, now is the time. The more you do now to make sure you stay safe, stay healthy, the faster we're going to get to those numbers. So with that, I'm going to ask our city manager to make her comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Wanted to remind folks there's still time to apply for our city committees and commissions. That includes planning, climate action, ped bike, and many more. Our applications are being accepted through next Monday, February 8th, and you can find a link to apply from our city homepage at cityofpetaluma.org. And at long last, I'm thrilled to announce the hiring of our vacant assistant city attorney position. I'm going to turn this over to our city attorney, Eric Danley, to introduce Dylan Brady, who joined our city team today. Welcome, Dylan.
Thank you very much, Peggy, for sharing some of your agenda time. I usually don't get to introduce new employees, but I get to today because we have a new addition in the city attorney's office, and I'm pleased to introduce Dylan, who's now on screen. You can see, and started getting acclimated in our office today. We're delighted to have him. Dylan's going to be focusing in his duties on transactional work and support for our planning functions and land use, among other responsibilities, also supporting public works and their transactional work. He joins us from the city of Vallejo, where he has been for the past 4 years. There he advised the city's planning department, economic development division, public works department. He also did code enforcement work for Vallejo, addressing nuisance properties. And prior to his work at Vallejo, he worked for Legal Aid of Sonoma County. He's a graduate of UC Davis as an undergrad, and from McGeorge School of Law. And in his free time, enjoys reading, playing and watching sports, and disc golf. So we're super excited to have him join our team. There's lots for him to engage with, to assist us and support staff and the council in doing our work. And so, Dylan, thank you for joining and for being here tonight. And do you have any? It's your turn if you'd like to address that.
No, yeah, thanks, Eric. And I just want to say Eric and staff have been really great, and I'm very excited to be joining Team Petaluma and excited to help the community.
Well, we're glad to have you. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Peggy, and thank you, Council. Hope you join me in welcoming Dylan. And
thank you. Thank you. I don't want to jump right in here to welcome him because I'm not sure if our city manager is finished.
I am finished. Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, okay, so with that, I will say thank you and welcome, Dylan. I'm sure we're going to keep you busy. So
Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. I'm sure I speak for the rest of the council on that. So with that, we will go on to approval of the minutes. We have minutes from January 11th and January 25th. There's no one has submitted any corrections. So if there is no comment, we will accept the minutes as submitted. And now we'll go on to approval of the proposed agenda for February 22nd. Is there any comment on that? Not seeing any hands up. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Was that the vice mayor who did the second?
No, that was
Dave King?
Who hasn't been vice mayor for quite a while, so.
Okay, well, you're right behind, you're right below him on my screen, so I knew the area it was coming from. I'm sorry. So we have a motion by Fisher and a second by King, and we will do a roll call vote.
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. And then we're on to the consent calendar. I have no request to remove anything from the consent calendar. Is there been any comments on the consent calendar? Not seeing any hands raised. I'll ask our city clerk if she's received any comment.
There was one public comment on item 3D, which has been posted to the website with the agenda packet.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll open public comment, and I will ask our city moderator to take care of that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this point, members of the public wishing to speak on the consent calendar, please raise your hand in Zoom and you will be called on in turn. You'll have 3 minutes in which to give your public comments. I see one hand raised, Madam Mayor, so I'm going to share my screen and call on Ben Peters to provide his comment. Ben, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Good evening, everyone. This is about the parks irrigation controllers purchase. So per Councilmember Healy's comments, we're at dangerously low water levels again. And so the city should do everything in its power to encourage smart water use, which includes this type of technology. So the question is, how do we promulgate this technology and get it out into the community? And if we think Measure M funding, parks funding is the best way to do that. So one program that the community should be aware of is through the Regional Climate Protection Authority. That's the Bayren Water Upgrades SAFE program, where ABAG provides financing for on-bill water upgrades, including smart controllers. Now, in the staff report, it mentions that the cost savings on this project is approximately $77,000 a year, with a capital cost of $170,000. So that's a sub 3-year payback, 2.2 years to be precise. Now, when we have scarce resources and the ability to do cost-effective projects like this, that's really when we should be leveraging our dollars versus using scarce Measure M funds, okay? So there's the Bayren program as an example. There's multiple financing programs through the Department of Water Resources. There's the California Climate Investments Program. Again, because this project is apparently so cost effective at 2.2 years, the question is not, should we do this project? The question is, A, is there a way to leverage additional funding to do this project? And B, can we expand this project? So there were some questions at the most recent parks meeting about this project. Now, I know in the public outreach section of the staff report, it mentioned that this was listed in the agenda. There was no mention of the robust discussion that took place at the parks meeting, which is interesting. And so the discussion there centered around, is there additional sites of the 47 listed that don't have this controller technology? If not, why not? What would be the cost to and savings to expand this program? So there was some legitimate questions that were asked in the meeting. Hopefully those would be included in this consent item. Perhaps they'll be addressed tonight, perhaps not. But again, we are in a drought. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments, Ben. And that is the last hand we have up. So I'm turning it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. With that, I will close public comment and bring it back to the council. And I have Vice Mayor has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was wondering if we could just have some comments on some remarks from the Parks Department on the previous comment and the potential to use financing, potential to expand it, anything like that. I agree this is a great project, and those were, I felt like the comment deserves some response.
Okay. I do see Public Works. Cindy Chong, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, Mayor, I think I'll go ahead and respond to Vice Mayor Barnacle's request there. So yeah, so a couple things when we're looking at the upgrades here, one of a few things, there are many financing programs, and I looked at a handful of them. The problem was timing, because this and the way it's presented to you in the consent item is not a new project. It's just to upgrade the existing infrastructure that's already fallen off the technology. So at commission, we did discuss this, and this comment did come up. And Vice Mayor Barnacle, I think I remember us discussing this. We are considering the second wave, which would be much more costly because you have to install the infrastructure. So that is coming. But this is just the first step to get the controllers that are offline back online.
Thank you.
Right. I guess I'm wondering, with a 2-year payback, it's surely that's great for any project. Is there sometimes if you roll the good project in with the bad project that's going to be way more costly, you can finance the whole thing? I guess I'm just wondering if that's been thought of, or if that's been explored. I'm sure it's been thought
Sure,
of.
we did discuss that when we initially were looking at this, because some of these controllers have been offline actually for over a year. And I was not aware of that because I've only been with the city just past year at this point. And the problem was just timing, because that becomes a major capital project that you have to bid out, which is an engineering project, which has to get in the budget funding cycle. So it was just a timing matter at that point. So it's a matter of, do we let this go a year or two and let that water waste go, or do we get what we have fixed, save as much water as we can, and then get the next step in the process?
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't see another. Oh, I do see another hand up. Councilmember King.
So I'd like to move the consent calendar.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from the Vice Mayor. Okay, can we have a roll call vote on that?
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Kosake.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. And we are on to new business. And this is the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Ramey and Associates for the general plan and housing element update. And I believe our city manager would like to kick this off.
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mayor, council members, and community. On the heels of selecting 21 Petalumans to serve on our GPEC committee, our General Plan Advisory Committee, at our last meeting, tonight marks another crucial milestone, that is the selection of our general plan consultant. Well, it's nothing short of a miracle that we were able to get to this point in the process, given the global pandemic plus challenges that many that we've navigated successfully. I want to recognize the efforts of our advanced planner, Christina Paul, who ensured that we stayed on task and on schedule, and that all of our efforts to date have included extensive feedback from our community, which was used to develop the request for proposals for this consultant, as well as for the proposed scope of work. We are ready for a general plan that responds to the needs of our community, that responds to our climate emergency, that addresses equity and environmental justice, and that gives our decision makers better tools to respond to development, environmental protections, housing laws, and that retains and improves the quality of life our residents deserve and have called for. This is a significant investment worthy of a bold new vision and blueprint for our city for generations to come. We're excited to introduce our recommended consultant team as they reflect the common values we treasure as a community and the commitment to innovation and collaboration that we expect as a city. With that, I'd like to introduce our advanced planner extraordinaire, Christina Paul.
Thank you so much, Madam City Manager. All right, so I'm going to just take us through the logistics of how we got here with the RFP and the selection committee and everything, and then I am going to turn it over to Matt Ramey and Ron Whitmore, who we have from Ramey and Associates, to give us a brief presentation with a little bit more detail about the scope of work that we are working on together. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so we have, once we kicked off this project last summer, really been working very hard at getting to this point. We did a great deal of community outreach, as you all know, meeting with the council, committees, commissions, members of the public. We had a survey, and we went through the process of getting the GPAC appointed. Somewhat simultaneously, we were developing our request for proposals, which we issued on November 7th. We got our two council members, Councilmember King and Councilmember McDonald, appointed to the General Plan Consultant Selection Committee on December 7th. We shortly thereafter, 1 week thereafter, got 3 proposals from 3 different planning firms in the Bay Area. We reviewed those and invited all 3 of the firms in for interviews that happened just last month, January 11th and 12th. The selection committee was made up again of council members King and McDonald, our city manager, our planning manager, Gina Betty Pecknick of Public Works and Utilities, Ingrid Alverde of Economic Development and Open Government, Olivia Irvin, a principal environmental planner, and then Ada Chan, who was representative of ABAG MTC, who was a housing expert. We put together this fairly large selection committee because we wanted to make sure that we had all of the technical expertise on hand that we needed to evaluate general plan proposals, and also that we had representatives of the community, elected representatives of the community in our council members. Each of the interviews were an hour and a half long. This is a little bit unusual, but when you're dealing with an issue of this complexity, we really wanted to give ourselves time to ask all the questions that we wanted to ask and get to know each of the teams. The 3 teams that we interviewed were Diet and Bhatia, Mintier Harnish, and Ramey and Associates. I do want to note that getting 3 proposals for a project of this complexity and magnitude and with this ambitious a schedule is an achievement. There are only around 7 firms that do this kind of work in the Bay Area. M Group is one of them, but we are working on the city side, and so this is about half the folks who could potentially have done this challenging project. Each of the selection committee members asked questions that they wished to on their own areas of interest and expertise, and then got a chance to ask some additional questions as well. So, here's a summary of all of the different kinds of topics that we touched on. After the presentations, we got together as a selection committee, and surprisingly, with a group of 9, the selection committee unanimously supported bringing Ramey and Associates forward to assist us in preparing our general plan. There were quite a few reasons for this. And I'll just name a few of them. One is that they put together a team with really strong technical expertise in all areas of planning. They have an in-house climate planning group, which we felt was important and useful. And they also have really good ties to HCD to think about our housing element with. This firm is a firm that is dedicated to public equity and sustainability, and not just in a way that they give lip service to it, but this is really core to their practice. They're very well known for public health in particular, and have done a lot of cutting edge work there, and Matt can give more details there if we're interested. They also are offering a robust community engagement program that the decision makers and community of Petaluma expect in order to really be co-participants in developing this plan material. Ramey, although they haven't worked directly in Petaluma, has spent a great deal of time getting familiar with the area. It's a Bay Area firm, and so they have some familiarity with Petaluma as well as Bay Area issues, statewide issues, and so on, which experience is valuable. One of the pieces that we've talked about from the beginning with the general plan is that we do not want to develop a plan that is a brick that sits on a shelf. And Ramey and Associates really had the most thoughtful implementation program. They weren't just going to give us a checklist at the end of this, but they're going to help us think through really how to get this general plan implemented, how it will integrate with our city functioning as an organization, how does this work with our strategic plan, and then how does it work with city fiscal sustainability? If we're thinking about scenarios for development, how will that play out in our ability to support all of the community, the whole community as a city organization? So our goal walking into this next stage is to begin working on a general plan that deeply involves our community and really builds our capacity. So when the consultant walks away, we can continue to carry that energy forward and be better as an organization. We want to increase equity and public health. We want to build our sustainability and resilience, support our economy, think about how existing growth will complement what is here already, ensures feasibility so that we're not planning for affordable housing that will never pencil out and never arrive. And then again, as I mentioned, builds the city organization and the community capacity as a whole. Looking at the schedule, this is in the packet, and we can certainly share it or come back to it if anybody has any questions. But what's really important here is to notice that what we're looking at is we're looking at major phases of the planning process, and we're looking at our major deliverables over here. And each of these green circles represent engagement activities that will happen in tandem with the deliverable development. That includes GPAC meetings. We're planning on having our first one in March. It also includes committee and commission meetings with the council and public touch points as well. So this is really a rich engagement program, and also one that we are going to continue to refine with Ramey, not only as one of our first tasks in the scope, which is to really work out what our engagement process will be, but as we go, there is some room in the scope and the budget to do engagement as that comes up and as that's necessary. The total proposed budget, this is an investment for the city, but something that the city has been planning for. So the total proposed budget is $2.7 million. I want to note that when we got the three proposals from the three consulting teams, they were all around the same amount. So for these three leading firms in the Bay Area, for our particular project, which actually includes more than the general plan and includes the climate action plan as well, they were all in the same range. We have around $1.8 million that are currently in the general plan fund, and we get around $200,000 a year additional. We've secured $275,000 in LEAP grant funding. We are in the process of applying, it's due in a couple weeks, for REAP grant funding. This $33,000 is non-competitive, so we expect to be awarded that. So in all, we have around $2.1 million currently and expect to have $2.5 million in 2.5 years. That's given the general plan fund growth. We're also in the process of applying for competitive grant applications. We could apply for up to $3 million, but actually we have quite a bit of this project funded already. So we could potentially do things like actually add a little bit more work and think about the fairground planning or priority development area planning that would essentially integrate in with the general planning process, maybe go a little bit beyond it, but really complement that work. So that includes these numbers here. We could apply for $850,000 or actually $950,000 for each of our priority development areas, as well as some funding for zoning, which is something that we would be planning to do after our general plan is complete. So I'm actually going to hold off here on questions. We're going to come back to these questions, but I want to turn it over to Matt Ramey and Ron Whitmore to talk a little bit more about the major facets of the scope. And of course, as always, please feel free to ask questions as they come up.
Thanks, Christina. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Matt Ramey with Ramey Associates. I have with me Ron Whitmore, who will be the project manager on the project, and he's also a principal at Ramey Associates. I just want to start out by thanking you all and saying that it's really an honor to be here. We have not worked in Petaluma, but I am a frequent visitor to the area. It's a community that I really love, and I have respected the community from a planning perspective for many, many years. So the fact that we're here and we're selected to potentially work with you on this exciting and really important project, it is quite an honor. Staff asked that I provide a high-level overview of our consultant team, and we know in the staff report you have a list of who the consultants are, and then a little bit about our scope of work and how we approach things. I am relatively informal, so if you have questions as we go along, I will not be offended if you chime in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
Excuse me. Let me just interrupt for a second, because I'm going to try and be looking at what you are presenting. So if someone from the council does have a comment, if you could just please identify yourself and interrupt when you interrupt, and do it sparingly, please. Okay, but don't miss a question. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I'm happy to take questions, either during or after. Okay, so let me share my screen here, and if I can get this going. Oh, that's not you. Okay, can you all see my screen here?
Yeah, you just need to go into slideshow.
That is, thank you. There we go. All right.
Oh,
great.
Now we see both of your slides.
Now you see both my slides. Let's see. How's that?
That should be the one when it finishes loading. There we go.
Okay, now you just see the slide, the cover slide here? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I'm just gonna start a little bit with what our understanding of the project is. We spent quite a bit of time, as you'll see, researching the community, talking with staff during the RFP process, reading the really well-written RFP, and it's very clear you guys have a very ambitious project ahead of you. To take on a general plan update with with all the issues and challenges and opportunities that you all have is going to be a fun and exciting process. So really, you're creating a update to your general plan with the housing element, which is going to be more of a challenge because of the RHNA numbers that have come forward. There's also a climate action plan as part of the process and many optional elements that we were asked to address. This has to be a plan that really builds on the vision for the community. It builds on the history and the culture of Petaluma. So there really are lots of challenges that we have to address, and these are challenges that weren't necessarily around 10 or 15 years ago when the last general plan was done. Affordable housing has become a huge issue. Climate change, sea level rise, natural protection of the natural environment, and health and equity issues really weren't as prominent. The project and the process has to engage all members of the community, and that's something that we're really firmly committed to. There needs to be a collaborative process with staff and the entire city government. And then the project has to be completed within 2 years, which is really a challenge for a general plan, because typically it's a minimum of 2 years for the process. We, based on this, created and put together a consultant team that we think is really excellent. They're a team of topic-specific experts who have both local and statewide expertise. I'm going to just start with just a quick introduction of Ramey and Associates, so you can get to know a little bit of who we are and why we plan and why we do planning. So I started the company about 15 years ago, and I started the company because I really wanted to have a firm that was dedicated to planning work with a lens for public health, sustainability, equity, and authentic community engagement. General plans are the bread and butter of what we do. However, we also do a lot of work creating specific plans, doing strategic plans, climate action plans, health policy, and program evaluation. So we have this great talented team that we put together, and one of the great things about this team is that we have worked with the majority of these folks on many, many projects over the years, including general plans where we have played similar roles. And that's really important to us because this is going to be a very fast-paced project. There's a lot of moving pieces. Ron Whitmore, who will be project manager, is a master at making all of these pieces move together, and the consultants know how to work together. We understand each other's skills and strengths, and we are really comfortable creating really innovative, cutting-edge plans on a very fast timeline. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the six project outcomes that we identified during the process. Now, all of this spans a whole range of topics, and so I am not an expert in all of these topics, so I won't be able to do every single one justice because they are really they're all really complicated. But I will go through all of these each in turn. So the first, and this is really, really critical and something that I know the community is passionate about, which is having an engaged public. And the engagement really needs to be from the very beginning, which Christina and team have really done an excellent job of. I have actually never seen and seen a city where they have over 100 people who have asked to be on a general plan advisory committee. The majority of communities actually are pulling teeth to select people to be on the committee. So kudos to the Petaluma citizens for really wanting to jump in and do this. I think people really recognize the power that planning can have in the community. So an engaged public and community engagement is really important. We start our process by listening and learning. We do know about the community, but we are not the experts in the community. It's the residents who are the experts in the community. We do outreach to make sure that we know who everybody is, and we create this robust outreach infrastructure to help us try and reach all of the residents. We then engage people in authentic conversations, and then we help them to be the decision makers in the process. We really want to put the community in the driver's seat. And what we ultimately want to do with this is when we leave and move on to another project, that the community has ownership of the plan. And we really find it a success when the general plan process can help develop a whole new generation of leaders who may not have been engaged previously. To achieve this, you've seen this graphic, but to achieve this, we have a really significant amount of community engagement work. And we are going to work with Plan to Place, which is based in Marin County, to help with our engagement effort. So we have just every single kind of activity that you could possibly, or most of them you could possibly imagine, in-person workshops when we can do them, educational forums, virtual workshops, pop-up meetings. We know that the community differs across the community and wants to focus on their neighborhood. So we have sub-area workshops. We have surveys that are statistically valid and opt-in surveys. We'll have many meetings with the Planning Commission and city council and other boards and commissions. And then we have a bucket of funds to do things that we didn't anticipate doing in the process. One of the key aspects of what we do with engagement is we identify who the stakeholders are at the beginning of the process and then track participation for those stakeholders throughout the process. And if we recognize that a segment of the community, either geographically or demographically, isn't participating, we will change course and make sure that they are, we will do our best to reach out to them and give them the opportunity to participate in the process.
Matt, can you go back one slide?
Sure thing.
Thank you. Can you, I really appreciated this graphic and I appreciate the focus on this. Can you comment on which of these events will be open to the public and which won't? And then when you say stakeholders, can you clarify examples of stakeholders that you're thinking? And then specifically, how will you be engaging with our Latinx population or the population that doesn't speak English as a primary language?
Okay, let me see if I remember all those questions that you asked. So if I miss one, let me know. So in terms of what's open to the public, the meetings, so the majority of the meetings really are open to the public. We do our best to have a very transparent process. Stakeholder interviews tend to be, and I'll come back to that in a second, but they tend to be one-on-one or really smaller group meetings. So those would not be open to the public, but just about everything else really would be open to the public. And so even the General Plan Advisory Committee meetings, which will be an important part of the process, we haven't discussed in tremendous detail with staff at this point, but we recommend that those are open to the public and that any question that we ask the General Plan Advisory Committee, we also give the public who's there an opportunity to answer the same questions. And so we've done that process in many communities, and they sort of turn into mini workshops, but they're really valuable to do, and the community really appreciates participating in that process. A stakeholder is anyone that has a vested interest in the community, and this is actually a question that we get asked a lot because everybody who has a vested interest is a stakeholder, and so how do we decide who do we talk to? And let me kind of tell you the purpose of these meetings at the very beginning. What we really want to do with stakeholder interviews is be able to talk to a broad spectrum of folks about the community. We believe that if we interview and have one-on-one meetings with maybe 20 or 30 people, we can get a really good picture of what's going on in the community. And that's the intent of it. We use the stakeholder interviews as a way to drink from a fire hose, so to speak, and really gain a really fast understanding of the community. It is not a process to leave anyone out. It's really a process to get us up to speed. We also make sure that we are available to meet with the community throughout the process. So if there's someone who we don't get to talk to and we decide later that we really should be meeting with them, we'll meet with them. And so we want to be really open. We really are committed to having as many people participate in the process as want to participate. And then you asked a great point about how do we reach out to the Latinx community. We have done quite a bit of work on this throughout the state in engaging communities that are typically harder to reach. Our primary strategy is to reach out through groups that are already established in the community. And it may not be groups that are planning organizations and that know about planning, but that are really tied in with the community. We have lots of different experience, and it depends, and I'm not familiar enough with the specifics, but sometimes there's someone who just is an individual who's really tied in, and everybody listens to that individual, and we need to find that individual and spend time with them and convince them that the planning process is valuable. We oftentimes go through churches, through PTAs, and through other organizations. We'll have materials in Spanish and English. We can run workshops in Spanish and English. We have multiple native Spanish speakers on staff who will help us lead the process. Diana Benitez was on the interview panel, and she is on the team and will help lead the engagement process. And it certainly is something that we need to keep going back and revisiting how we are engaging with the community throughout the process. That
Thank you.
okay?
Perfect.
And I apologize. As you can see, I am pretty passionate about community engagement and how we do this work. So careful of questions because I will answer them in detail. Okay. So the next outcome that we talked about is achieving equity, justice, and health. And as Christina said, this is an area where that my firm was really founded on. We were one of the first firms to create a standalone health element for a general plan, and this work, our work and the work of others, helped lead to the new bill that was passed a few years ago, SB 1000, which is the environmental justice legislation. We use a variety of fields and frames in order to think about our work. There's sort of straight up public health, but we also look at it through an equity and justice framework. And we realize that all of this connects to urban planning. We have to look at the social determinants of health, of income, education, and then we layer onto this exposure to pollution, community amenities, and public services, access to healthy foods, transportation, and housing affordability. And throughout the process, we develop a series of, assessments to really understand what's going on in the community. And we look at we do our assessments geographically and demographically, because we want to understand if there are pockets of the community that are adversely impacted by planning decisions, and as well as segments of the community. And we overlay one on top of the other. Once we identify where the communities are and what the issues are, we'll do more focused engagement with those communities, and then we'll work to develop goals and programs to address the issues that we find. Another pillar of Ramey and Associates and part of our mission is about creating a sustainable community. And we were really delighted to hear that you all want to strive for carbon neutrality by 2030. It's a very ambitious goal, especially because it's now only 9 years away. And so we're really excited to be part of that effort. We have worked on REACH codes, we've worked on climate action plans, and we've worked on general plans that strive for carbon neutrality. So we're very adept at doing this kind of work and really excited about it. What we really want to do is think about not only the opportunities such as carbon neutrality, but also some of the impacts and the exposures that we have. And as you can see here, we have done a little bit of mapping of what we think some of the impacts are, and this is sea level rise. And so we need to understand what the exposures are to climate, the sensitivity and the potential impacts of climate exposure to the physical environment as well as the social environment. We need to evaluate the ability of the city to actually be able to address the impacts that are coming. There are some things that you have control over, and there are some things that you don't, as you know, and then develop a list of prioritized adaptation measures. When we look at solutions, we really want to look at multi-benefit solutions. So how can we develop solutions to climate change that also produce other co-benefits, such as additional open space or addressing health and equity concerns? And so we'll be looking at those co-benefits as well. And I do want to stress that it's really important to think about equity and climate together, because it typically, going to the Vice Mayor's comment, it is typically some of the underserved communities that are most impacted by climate change and the least able to adapt to climate change. We want to make sure that we are able to do this. We want to make sure that we're defining clear objectives, and we're identifying programs and policies that will address this. Some of our work is actually, that we'll do for this, is based on the document that you see here, which is called the Guide to Equitable Community-Driven Climate Preparedness Planning, which is quite a mouthful of a name, but it's a product that we did working for USDN a few years back. The next outcome that we need is a strong economy, and this is, of course, one of the other pillars of sustainability, is economic sustainability. We have on our team 2 firms who will help us with this. Strategic Economics, which is based in Berkeley, and David Greensfelder, who is also based in Berkeley, who's a retail expert. So what we do is we want to look specifically at what are the sectors of the economy and how those sectors are impacted by the changes that we see coming coming before us. We want to look at what it takes to make sure that all of the things that you want are actually we're able to pay for, and we're able to achieve it through the decisions. And this is something that we feel pretty strongly about, which is making sure that we're not just creating a plan of ideas, that we're creating a plan that can be implemented, and to help create and make sure that the community is fiscally sustainable. Ultimately, this will end up in an economic development element as well as part of the implementation program. The next topic, and this is really a lot of times at the core of a general plan, which is how do we accommodate growth and change in the community in such a way that we can protect great things about the community and identify and work to overcome challenges that exist. This is our flow of work that we have here, which begins with researching the history and urban morphology of the community. Every community is really different. We need to understand how the community has evolved over time so that we can understand the physical pattern that we see before us now. We then evaluate existing conditions and identify opportunities and threats. Because every city is different and every neighborhood in the city is different, we will spend time identifying the unique sub-areas of the city and categorizing those, and then use all of that work before to identify the barriers to and opportunities for change in the community. Again, part of our process is really making sure that we are preserving and doing our best to preserve the things that you love about the community, and also to address the issues and challenges that you have. And based on this, once we have identified the sub-areas of the city where there might be an opportunity for change to address some of the concerns that you have, we'll create alternatives. We'll then evaluate those alternatives, select a preferred direction, and then craft the plan.
Can you go back one more time? Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things, was seeing the amount that you put into community engagement and alternative. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges based on what you do know about Petaluma and what you see in terms of some of the challenges ahead for us?
Yeah, actually, if I could go to the next slide, I think we're going to start getting into some of that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So this is a series of slides that we developed during the engagement process to begin to understand the community. We use a software called Urban Footprint, which is an online data and analysis tool, and it contains a huge amount of information.
Matt, I'm
Yes,
sorry to interrupt you, but your audio, something's going on with it. It's
You can try muting yourself and then unmuting it. That may fix the issue.
Thanks, Patrick.
Let me just stop sharing for a second. Okay, is this better?
No.
No. Oh boy. Ron? Do you want to take over? So this is the backup system.
Yeah, if you want to put the slides back up, sure. Is my audio better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. While Matt's putting the slide back on the screen, it's a pleasure to meet you all. It's been great working with Peggy and Heather and Christina to get to know the city and prepare for meeting all of you. We look forward to working with all of you and your constituents throughout this process. So as Matt was saying, at the heart of that land use and growth planning process that he was summarizing is our use of the urban footprint scenario modeling software, in which we're able to relatively quickly and easily identify existing land uses, as well as the constraints that really define roughly the parameters of opportunities for growth and development, and then identify opportunity sites within those areas. Is that, Matt, I apologize, the next slide, the alternatives? I believe it is. Yeah, so based on that, we then look at different alternatives, or sometimes they're called scenarios, which are really a great way to use modeling to, without actually establishing policy and having to see how it actually implements over the years, you can actually model different sets of policies and then rerun the urban footprint scenario modeling software to see what outcomes it gets you. So you can make informed, you can understand better the outcomes associated with different scenarios through a model to inform your decision making about which policy direction to take. So on the screen here, you see just two highly speculative alternatives at this point. One would be focusing growth in the northwest and southeastern ends of the city. The other would be focusing it more towards the downtown and central parts of the city. What the model allows us then to do is to compare the outcomes of each of those scenarios. Next slide, please, Matt. Across a range of indicators. And these indicators correspond with goals that were established earlier in the planning process that the community has for through the planning horizon. And as you can see, the software modeling allows us to, in a very objective, data-driven way, compare what will happen under each of those scenarios. We then, part of the reason we do this is because we know at the end of the day, we're bringing to you, the policymakers for the city, tough decisions about which future to choose for the city. And we are able to provide you pretty concrete data about what we expect you'll get based on different choices you may make so that you can make a fairly well-informed decision.
Can you hear me now? Is my audio still bad?
Yes, it is still bad.
Okay.
Hey, Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you can call in because we definitely want to be able to hear from you.
Thank you, Christina.
Next slide, Matt. So as Matt mentioned up front, really 6 outcomes that we expect from the general plan update process. The final one is, as has been highlighted both by Christina and Matt already, is that, and all this work is for naught if at the end of the day, the city isn't left with a clear set of tools for what to do next. And that can inform, and it really should inform at a range of levels. It should be very clear for you, the city council, what policies to establish across a range of areas and areas of focus for the city to make sure they're consistent with the general plan. They should provide clear guidance for department heads and under them, city staff for how to focus budgets and how to design and prioritize programs. And then perhaps most importantly, to maintain fiscal sustainability, it should make very clear what budget priorities should be through the life of the plan, and also identify clear funding and financing sources available to this. The other piece that I should emphasize is that, as Matt mentioned up front, when done well, engagement really prepares stakeholders and citizens and residents of the city to play increasingly active role in the community. And so a plan that has a strong implementation strategy also includes materials that make it very easy for the regular lay people and residents to pick up a short, graphically and visually attractive document and be very clear about what direction the city is choosing to take and what role they can play in implementing the general. Slide, Matt. Okay, I think that was it. Sorry, Matt, that your sound got garbled. I believe we're turning it over to city staff at this point to facilitate additional discussion and Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Ron. And thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Fisher, I'm noticing that your hand is up. Do you want to ask a question before we move to the next slide? Oh, you're on mute, ma'am.
So I thought we were done with this slide, so I'll hold it.
Okay. So partly while Matt comes back online. So let me just share my screen one more time, just to wrap up this piece. Here we go. Okay, so in thinking about this, planning for a general plan is a complex process, and of course you're welcome to ask any questions that you would like, but we would love to hear from council if you have any questions about the consultant selection process or team, if you have any questions about the scope in general or comments on it, and then we would love to hear from you how you would define a successful general plan process and outcome.
Okay, so is that it?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. So I will go back to Councilmember Fisher because I think you did have your hand up.
I did, thank you. First question is, in the extra funding that we're going to be going after the grant funding, is there funding for a bicycle and pedestrian plan? Because I know we have a consultant basically chosen to do that, but don't have any funding for it. And I think it's going to be a critical piece of our success in getting people alternative to transit to vehicles.
Yes, thank you. Matt, are the last few digits of your phone number 8332? Okay, Patrick, could you elevate him from an attendee to a panelist, please? Yeah, thank you.
I cannot elevate him, but I've allowed him to unmute himself. I believe that's *6 to unmute.
Okay, thank you. So we haven't worked out all of the intricate details of the pedestrian and bicycle plan, but there is a great deal of pedestrian and bicycle planning that will be happening as part of the general plan. And if we get the funding for the priority development areas, or some portion of that funding, then we would certainly be, in fact, required and excited to do much more detailed planning in those areas and the areas that connect to them.
Great, thank you.
Did you have another follow-up question?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I see Mr. Healy's hand is up.
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. This is ambitious, especially for the time frame. And it's going to be an interesting ride. I would just make two comments and have one question. First of all, alternative 2, which was put up on one of the slides, punching out the urban growth boundary in the southeast quadrant, that's a non-starter for me. I'll just put that out there. I will not be supporting that. And then a question with respect to surface water modeling. I believe West Yost is going to be brought on board. And I just wanted to know what the scope of that would be, if we're going to be using FEMA as a starting point, FEMA's floodplain mapping, if we'll be using the computer modeling that was so problematic in our last general plan update. And if people can comment on that. And then this is more of an observation than a question, but we do, depending on the endpoint of our new general plan, we'll either be doing 2 or 2.5 RENA cycles worth of housing that we'll need to accommodate. And having spent some time now looking at the David on draft EIR, I think we should not be putting forward a housing element to the state that includes residentially zoned lands in areas that don't meet our VMT criteria. So I'd be curious about your thinking on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want, can you respond to that? Does someone want to respond to that?
Yes, I can respond, and I think that Matt can talk also. Just Councilmember Healy, your point on the urban growth boundary is well taken. We were having our phone crisis while that slide was up, and it was a totally hypothetical scenario modeling, and they can talk about that a little bit more. So I'm sorry that wasn't abundantly clear, because that's certainly an expectation that we'll not be running forward with that one. In terms of the floodplain modeling, Ramey & Associates has Sherwood engineers on to help with that work. And then we've also decided to move forward with what was an ongoing city effort to bring West Yost on to help update the FEMA modeling process. If you want to know more detail about that, I see that Gina is on if we want to try to pull her in to give us more detail, but we will have a lot of capacity in terms of floodplain modeling and sea level rise. And Matt, I'm going to answer, and then you pitch in because I'm sure that you have ideas as well. In terms of the RENA cycles and what the life of the plan will be, it may make sense for us to begin planning on like a 16-year cycle, because we might look forward and think, you know, in another couple of RENA cycles, we're going to want to be doing a fairly full refresh. But one of the things that we're going to be thinking about a lot as part of this general plan is, you know, how do we keep this plan fresh? How do we make it not sit on a shelf? How often do we need to check in on it? And it may be that those RENA cycles are really important checkpoints, and then there's something in the interim. But I'm sure that Matt has something to say about that. And I'll leave VMT to you, Matt, as well.
Yeah, thank you. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Great. I apologize profusely for my computer acting up. So the RENA question is somewhat of a policy question that we can address during the process. Typically, we plan for 3 RENA cycles. This RENA, we know, is larger than it probably ever has been, and maybe larger than it ever will be in the future. So I think that we need to think about how we plan that. In terms of where growth goes, that is absolutely one of the critical policy questions that we have during the process. And yeah, the 2 alternatives we showed were kind of picking a center and 2 fringe options just to show differences and how the modeling software would work. And so again, where growth goes, what it looks like is really all part of the process that we do. But I would encourage us to think about the general plan on multiple levels. One is that it's a long-term visionary document. And if we only think 16 years or, you know, 2 RENA cycles, we're sort of getting caught up in the state's guidelines about when they look at housing elements, rather than using this as a real opportunity to think really big about the city and then to identify those interim steps about how we get there. And so again, I think we can create this general plan so that it actually operates at different levels. One is a very long-term visionary document, and the other is a more short-term document that's usable. And then we set a series of checkpoints internally to understand how well we're meeting those the targets in the plan itself.
Thank you. Councilmember Posake.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Matt, we talked about health, or you talked about health, you talked about social determinants of health, you talked about equity, and I'm sure I have among the least experience here of actually reading general plans and such, but I'm concerned about racism. And we've had, you know, increasing concerns with increasing numbers of members of our community with racism. You know, I know it's a very difficult issue to deal with policy, but I was just wondering if you had any experience with thinking about policy related to racism.
Yeah, it is it's a tough topic to talk about, but it's really prevalent, and we do have quite a bit of experience with it internally. We have lots of conversations as well, but we really do try to address racism in the planning process itself. And you know, there are different levels, but what we really try to look at is institutional racism, because that's what the city really has control over. And so that's everything from land use decisions to funding decisions, and we can really look at who is in the community, at what levels of service they're getting, what their quality of life is, and really try and change the policy direction in the city, and really look critically at that with you, to make sure that the decisions that we are making and the policies we are putting in the plan and the programs that are moving forward are not reinforcing any past racist decisions, and that we're actually trying to turn the tide on that.
Thanks.
Is that any other questions?
No, that's all I have.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Barrett. Great answer on that last question. There was some mention about barriers to infill. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. And then the other thing I jotted down was around implementation and just how you keep the document flexible, planning for 3 arena cycles out, and how you some of the things you do to make it relevant in 15 years or 20 years.
Sorry, it takes a little time to mute and unmute my phone here. So the barriers to infill, there are a number that we've identified, but a lot are really going to come out during the process. So some of the barriers that are the obvious ones are the parcel size in the community, the cost of construction, the process that projects need to go through in order to redevelop a parcel. Some of the parcels that may be more prime for development in some ways may have constraints such as flooding, or may be susceptible to sea level rise in the future. And so what we'll do as part of our process is to really try and understand what those barriers are, then identify the parcels that have those barriers, and then work in the process to figure out how we can overcome through policy and regulation what's stopping the development that you want to happen. Now, the flip side of that is sometimes there's types of development you don't want to happen. And so we want to think about not only what you want to encourage, but what you might want to discourage in certain areas of the city. And so that's all going to be part of the process. Your question about implementation is really one that I spend quite a bit of time thinking about. And in fact, we ended up about 5 years ago bringing on a couple of folks who deal with program evaluation, because we were concerned that that plans that we are creating aren't necessarily as implementable as possible, and that we never actually have this process put in place to truly evaluate the plans that we create. And so what we want to do is there's a couple of things that we do in order to try and keep the document fresh. One is that we think about goals and policies separate from implementation programs and implementation actions. They are not the same thing. A policy is essentially we see it as a ongoing implementation action. Then there are actions that you do, a plan, a project that you build, and we want to really separate the two of those. We then want to tie the specific implementation actions to the things going on in the city, including departmental work plans and the CIP. We want to set metrics for what we want to achieve, and then set a process in place so that we can continually evaluate progress towards those metrics. And then we want to have a methodology into the plan itself so that there are constant checkpoints back to review the plan. I think there are things that you don't want to change in the long term. You want a long-term vision. You want the values of the community that are generally going to stay the same over a longer time horizon. But you want to be able to identify programs and actions and even some policies that you can change on a shorter term basis to respond to changing environments, for example, COVID.
Got you. One final question. Are you going to put a price tag on our climate action plan?
What do you mean? You mean in terms of the cost of each of the actions in the climate action plan?
Like the cost of dealing with 4 feet of sea level rise. That's one of the things that there's been a couple of climate action plans that I've seen, but a lot of them just say, these are things you should be doing, and they don't lay out how you're actually going to, finance that, right? And how do we deal with 4 feet of sea level rise and whatnot? And, maybe it's something we can't do, but I'm just wondering, I think it's important to elevate the cost of climate change as we think about, a lot of times people say it costs so much, and we need the opportunity cost too.
There's a cost of inactivity, which is, it sounds like what you're talking about. I think we'll have to talk to our team. I think it's a really good point in terms of how do we identify the cost of doing things and the cost of not doing things, and make that part of the decision-making process. So I'll probably have to get back to you on that one, but I think it's a really good idea to really make sure that it's real, the plan is real and implementable.
Okay, thank you. So before I open public comment, I noticed the guide that your company did in 2017, the Guide to Equitable Community-Driven Preparedness Planning. Is that available for us to see? Good. Okay. It would be. I would be very interested in seeing that. So perhaps we can talk to staff about where we could see that. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to look at public comment, and I'll ask our city clerk if she's received any public comment on this item.
Mayor Barrett, we received one public comment, which is posted to the website with the agenda packet.
Thank you. And so now I'll ask our moderator, as we open public comment, to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. You'll have 3 minutes in which to give your comments. And we have 2 hands currently raised. First is Josh Simmons, followed by Taryn Obaid. Josh, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, everyone. This is fantastic. I'm really encouraged by the process here. There's just one thing that I want to speak to, and it's something I've spoken to previously, but I just want to kind of resurface it. I want to make sure, it's important to me that the city make appropriations so that we can have, human translations of basically all of the materials as much as possible, and especially in the public outreach and community outreach parts of the process. Machine translation is a really handy shortcut, but it's not something that can be relied on and doesn't really provide the same level of, language access. So anywho, I just hope that this is a funding consideration that's made in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments, Josh. The next speaker is Taryn Obaid, followed by M. Ann Sullivan. Taryn, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Hi, thank you. I really appreciate this presentation tonight, the process, the way that you articulate a lot of the components and your thinking. I just wanted to offer up a few kind of random comments, and I'm sure you'll know where to note them down or where they go. And pardon me if you've already thought of them, but they just went over my head because I'm not a planner. So first things that I think that are really important are that you probably already noticed, Petaluma is basically a big drain. It's a low level valley and we flood. We're not just a river town, we are a flood town. And I would really like to see every effort that you can think of, and even more that you haven't even dreamt of yet, to absolutely take care of our river, pull the development away. We've got a lot of landowners that have land right on the banks of the river, and they're just pulling every political lever they can to get their lands developed on, and it's a big problem. You may be aware, I hope you're aware, that the Army Corps of Engineers says do not build north of the flood dam. That's a spot where the Petaluma River comes down and 2 additional creeks merge with the river. And we flood here. We flood here all the time. People's backyards, the sewers back up, the storm drains. It's a big problem. I'd really like to see teeth, ordinances, very strict, with penalties for violations, with additional costs, real concrete disincentives for violating the laws of nature, of how our low-level valley needs to drain. I'd like to see no credit trading allowed. That would be carbon credits. That would be wetland credits, which we do all the time here. I've kind of come to think of these kinds of decisions that we've made in the past as off-planet decisions. You make that decision, you're basically putting us on this trajectory to, we're all going to have to jump ship and get off this planet. We need really bold action, actionability, really clear direction with consequences that people will not want to do in order to protect our homes, our lives. People won't have to swim out on floods. So I'd really appreciate that. And thank you very much for your work and for your attention.
Thank you for your comments, Taryn. Next speaker is M. Ann Sullivan, followed by Susan Kirks. M. Ann Sullivan, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Yes, good evening. What any consultant needs to understand is that our Petaluma River is a major tributary of the San Pablo Bay. Our town is a river town. We have rare, vital, and irreplaceable wildlife habitat within our urban growth boundary, which absolutely sets us apart from almost any other city. Thusly, conservation needs to be a big part of our general plan, and I didn't see a single mention of it in your presentation. Sonoma County sits at the peak of landfall for atmospheric storms, like we were treated to last week, and we're number 1 out of 58 California counties and 11 Western states for flood losses. Our city has declared a climate emergency. One of the most cost-effective assets in the fight against climate change impacts are nature-based solutions. The National Academy of Sciences recently reported that nature conservation can provide in excess of 1/3 of the emission reductions that are needed. Wetlands hold the greatest volume of carbon. By preserving all our remaining wetlands and grasslands from being concreted in, we can achieve a number of vital goals. We can preserve critical habitat. We can preserve the flood storage capacity of the floodplain. We can filter contaminants. We can ensure healthy river flows. There are so many places for us to build housing, and including our absolutely botched Target and Deer Creek developments that were supposed to be mixed use. We also have the fairgrounds and the outdated Kmart shopping center. We must preserve all of our parcels adjacent to the river and not allow them to be developed. Let's take a page out of Sonoma County's strategic plan that they spoke about tonight. They spoke about river setbacks, riparian corridors, identifying areas within the city that would provide us with maximum CO2 sequestration, which are our wetlands and our grasslands, and to provide opportunities for climate change adaptation. They spoke about overall landscape and species resiliency and biodiversity loss. So we need to be way less human-centric. Again, we have major wildlife habitat in the midst of our urban growth boundary, not out at Helen Putnam Park, but right here on the river. Special status species that need to be protected. So let's pull back way off of this river and put humans where humans should be and stop this incredibly human-centric approach to things on, racial equity and it's complete speciesism. We're completely ignoring non-human animals, and it's going to be to our and their detriment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Susan Kirks, followed by Dwayne. Susan, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Susan Kirks, and I was an applicant for the General Plan Advisory Committee, but I understand I did not get any votes. And I guess what I'd like to say about that is one of the things I bring to our community for the sake of the team that's being considered as the consultant. And I'm glad to follow Ms. Sullivan and Ms. Obaid in my comment, is a fairly deep level of experience in conservation and our natural environment. So what I did was I read the RFP because I was trying to trace back to why it is that basically the natural environment received little to no acknowledgement or attention. And that actually goes to the selection of the General Plan Advisory Committee experience depth as well. And it is from the RFP because really your consulting firm hasn't been asked to focus on exactly what Ms. Sullivan was just saying, and it is very, very important. I'm working on a wildlife corridor and crossing mapping based on 21 years of field study and observations here in Petaluma. And that may be helpful to your firm. That will be published probably at the end of February. And I'm also working on, with some other colleagues, on a tree vegetation habitat mapping and listing for relationship to enhancing habitat for birds and wildlife through the Audubon Society, which is an organization I am privileged to also lead here in Sonoma County. So, yeah, unfortunately, this is nothing new here in Petaluma, and I guess a lot of us will be attending a lot of advisory committee meetings and look forward to speaking with your firm if you are selected to be the consulting firm. And I will say that I brought to our Climate Action Commission the species extinction threat, which is part of our stated climate emergency, because it was completely left out in their initial work. And I'm really pleased that to have collaborated with some of the commissioners and to have that included now with my input actually for that particular area in the climate action plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Susan. Next speaker is Dwayne, followed by Paul G. Dwayne, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Thank you very much. I especially want to thank the firm for having applied and the selection committee. And I thought what they said was very nice. I would hope we'd be able to get copies of the slides. I appreciated Mike jumping in and saying that he had an objection to one of the slides that showed the map. It's good to see people that were actually could get that much detail right in immediately spoken of. The one small point I would make at this point is that the sea level rise will be compounded by the flooding, and one of the problems we have is people may stand for one flood a year, one flood a decade, one flood 100 years, but living in floods every a couple, 2 or 3 times a year would drive people away. So to make sure that we don't put housing where there's going to be sea level rise compounded by flooding. The one I wanted to mention was the railroad going through town. If it's still going to be going to Nevada with 4 foot of water rise, they're going to have to raise the railroad. And when they raise the railroad through downtown, they're going to create an interesting hydraulic effect where the one side of the track will have water flooding, the other side will be dry. And I would like that to be addressed in your plans as you go along. Other than that, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Dwayne. Next speaker is Paul G, followed by Beverly Alexander. Paul G, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Hi, this is a very good meeting. I appreciate all the thought that went into the presentation and the fact that we are looking so much to the future and try to make things better in Petaluma. So thanks to everybody who's been involved. I have to admit that I very much agree with Ms. Sullivan's comments. I think it's very simple to see that you're correct. If you actually take a full advantage of our wetlands, that is our best avenue for sustainability, which means that we actually have to take a hard look at all those developers that really want to try to build there and just say no. That's all we have to do. Is we have hills around that we can push other houses and other kinds of development to, but absolutely preserve every stitch of wetland. It is going to be our future. Don't make any compromises. And look, if you looked at what was going on in the last 4 years, there was no thought of this. It all kind of went there. It's kind of ridiculous. Come on. So the idea is, if you're serious about this, and you're not just going to play it lip service, you're going to make these kinds of decisions and you're going to address them in your general plan. What else can you do? Well, of course, we could get a little more vertical. I mean, that's really something you could do if you have to have more housing units. A little more vertical is not going to hurt so much for the footprint idea, and we can actually have some more people. Hey, what else is going on? We got a real trend here. People kind of like working from home. That's all right. It's not so bad to be doing some of the Zoom stuff and working from home and getting things done. You have pretty good family life as a result. What do we need? We need fiber optic everywhere. That's got to be in the general plan. We need all the great bandwidth we can get so people can work from home. We won't have to commute. We won't have to keep taking up land for housing. We'll be a little more vertical, but we'll do it in a safe way because everybody have a wired connection. One of the worst things about living in an apartment building is you have to deal with everybody's wireless router. You can actually say, hey, we're going to build a nice 6-story building here and not a stitch of wireless in this building. We're going to be very energy efficient with how we move our data. And that would be through fiber optic cable. So these are ways that we want to take a look at looking things efficiently, not using too much energy, and really trying to use our land as the beautiful land that we have here. We're in a little slice of heaven here. We have beautiful climate. We got this great slough. It's not really a river, it's a slough. And it goes tidal, and you should recognize that. It does have to be dredged every once in a while. So it's not a river. You call it a river, but it's not. And so you have to treat it a little bit differently. I think this consulting firm has a good idea of being able to learn from the community. I look at $2.8 million, though, and I say, I don't know, we don't have to spend that much. I think we should spend about half that much, and we should go get new grants for it and get it all done for about half the budget. That's good enough. I think we'll be fine if we just put some of these simple principles in place and put some of that money towards the rest of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next speaker is Beverly Alexander, followed by Lance Kuhn. Beverly, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Okay, thank you all. And thank you to everyone who has spent so much time on this project. And then there's the but. First of all, we only got the RFP pretty late in the game, and I wish we had had more time to look at it to make, reasonable comments. One part that stood out to me is the stakeholder interviews and stakeholder meetings. To me, being a stakeholder means you have a lot more say than anyone else. There are just relatively few stakeholders. And the stakeholder, it said there would be up to 25 one-hour stakeholder meetings. And the stakeholders may include city council members, advocacy organizations, major industry representatives, small business owners, real estate brokers, developers, etc. Most of the people who are listed are people who are in this town making a profit from something or other. It does not include environmental experts, scientists, naturalists, meteorologists, there are many ists. And I think we need some more expert advice. And I wanted to say there's a lot of emphasis on the built environment and not enough emphasis on the natural environment. And as others have said, we're dependent on the natural environment and we will ignore it to our peril. We need to protect our river corridor and the wild creatures and plants that are also part of our community. It's not just about whether we're going to flood or not. We have allowed 98% of our river habitat to be destroyed. And we need to make a firm commitment to protect what remains. And also from the last general plan, we need to complete that 6.5-mile river trail. And I guess that's about it. More attention to our natural environment. This is what was here before us. And we need to make sure that what little remains, we can protect. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for those comments. Next speaker is Lance Kuhn. So Lance, you may unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Okay, I actually like to echo what Beverly just said. She said a lot of the things I would have said. It seemed that this plan doesn't really mention like other species, like biodiversity and restoration of our wetlands and making, talking about the fact that this is a river town. It seems to be very human-centric. So it would be nice if the plan would identify areas that are ecologically sensitive that we wouldn't develop in, not just a matter of like, is it profitable or not? Another thing too, I'd like to talk about the process a little bit. As far as I know, nobody in town knew that this proposal would be at this meeting until 5 days ago. So it would be good to have more time for public input so that perhaps we could actually influence the city council with our comments, and also maybe revise the proposal or whatever to accommodate biodiversity if it doesn't already. So thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. And Madam Mayor, that's the last hand I have up, so I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll close public comment and bring the discussion back to the council. And before we start talking at the council, I'd like to remind us of the questions that staff asked of us, in particular, looking for what we would define as a successful process and outcome here. Because I think giving that kind of, defining that gives direction to not only our consultant and our staff, but also the people who have so generously given time from our community to volunteer to be part of this effort. So with that, I do see a hand up, and that is Councilmember Fisher.
And I'm unmuted. So the question for Matt, in terms of the research and researching the history of our community, how far back do you actually plan on going?
Sorry, it takes a while to unmute the phone. We go, well, I'd have to actually talk. We have a historic and cultural expert on the team, and so they would have more detail on that. But you know, I think we're going to go back to the pre kind of you know, the pre-human times to look at what the natural environment was like initially, and then see how that gets built up, and what the changes were over time based on human intervention.
Great. So back to the Miwoks and before that. So awesome.
Yeah.
Because I think that will address Beverly Alexander's concerns, and you know, get this view of human-centric, and expand that view, and look at our ecology. And Mayor had asked about that document that you had created in 2017. We can put that on the city's website. And Christina, do you want to go ahead and let the public know about our city's website and how they can interact with it? And at the same time, I had a question about the ULI report and whether we've gotten that back and can put that on our resources.
Yes, so we have a project website, which is at planpetaluma.org. So you can directly access any general plan materials there. We have a food for thought idea exchange place where we are posting articles and so on. So we'll find the right spot to put Matt's report, and then we can send that around. The other question was about the ULI report. We did get a draft from them, and staff provided comment back to them because they weren't entirely accurate, and they kind of thought that we were really obsessed with wine and so on. So we just sent them some comments back because we have broader interests in Petaluma.
How about you, but not me.
And so we expect that we will get that pretty soon. I'll check in on that and get back to you.
Okay. And to the mayor's question about what would be a successful general plan, it's one that outlines how we get to carbon neutrality by 2030 and all the other things that are in our framework plan, and with measurable goals and implementing steps we can take over this period of time in order to get to that place. And that's only 10 years from now. So I personally don't think that this is going to be a 16-year plan. Because I think things are going to continue to change much faster than our plan can actually keep up with. Was there any other question you wanted us to answer?
No.
I know Christine had 3, but Christina.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Barrett. So in terms of what success looks like, it's the the people who just commented about the biodiversity, I want to make sure they're heard, because I think that a lot of our environmentalists in this city feel like we've not been listening to them. And I want to make sure that they're heard. So when we do the stakeholder interviews, maybe stakeholder focus groups, if we can do that, there's some really, we have a lot of expertise, and as you see here, but we just have a lot of really engaged people, and they have different expertise. So really try and bring that out, whether it's groups of 5 or something like that. But there's some really, they've got experience too, and history that I think would be helpful and informative as we go forward. I really love the idea of the metrics and the tracking methodology. That's one of my favorite things. So really I'm looking forward to seeing what those are and making sure that those are measurable to the extent that we can make them economic. And I like that too. I also really want to stress the cost of things like sea level rise and what that means, because ultimately what we're going to do over the next 20 years is going to be here for the next 50 or 100. And I want to make sure that people understand what we're signing up for.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will jump in at this point. I want to echo the Vice Mayor on the metrics. I really, really liked the response regarding how you keep a long-term document alive and how you keep it functional. And I think that when we did our general plan, basically at the beginning of this century, there was a lot of community involvement in that, and it was a really good plan. But the problem is that we didn't really finance or put money aside in order to keep it up with what was changing. And if we know anything, we know that things change. And so it's a real challenge to keep a document living. I think this is a good effort, and I look forward to seeing how that is implemented. I think in terms of what defines success, I think the process as it has already started to unfold gives me great confidence in the success of the process. And I just know that our community is such that there will be community involvement. So that I'm not worried about. I think that Mr. Healy made a really good point that may have been lost in so far as it seemed like something small, but it really, I think, is really very important. As we look at where we are developing this town, VMT is a new measurement for all of us. And just as we are beginning to look at it with specific plans coming our way, we are seeing how difficult it may be to develop and meet our VMT goals. So I think that needs to be certainly something that this general plan is taking into consideration, because I don't think those guidelines are going to get less strict. I think they're going to get more strict. So these are, I'm sure you're already well aware of this, but it doesn't hurt to say it twice. I also think that, and I really have to thank Beverly Alexander, I didn't see any reference to our existing river plan that is part of the backbone of our existing general plan, and that does need to be updated, enhanced, and implemented. So we need to find a way of doing that in this general plan. So with that, I see other hands up. So, and I didn't see what the order they came up in. So I do see Mr. Healy, and then I see Mr. King and Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think we've gone over some of our goals here. There are a lot of them. This is going to be a challenging document to bring forward. I just wanted to talk briefly a little bit more about process. I very much want this to be fact-based and science-based and evidence-based, and I'm impressed by the consulting team, and I think that will be the case. There are people who in the community want to put stuff out as fact, which may or may not be fact, and so I very much want to see that we are sticking to scientifically sound analysis here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. King?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't have a lot of comments about the hiring process since I sat through and participated in the interviews and the decision making to make the recommendation, which I'll just remind people because it was a while ago, was unanimous. All 9 people recommended this particular consultant out of the process. But to answer the question that was posed by Christina Paul about this, we are about to have a 21-person committee, basically, along with the consultant and staff, guide the process. Those committee members will also have others from the community who were not appointed, and the few that didn't apply, will be able to say what they want for their community. And so what I'm looking for is to have a broad-based community input. We have to deal with what certain realities of the existence of the city. We already have our parks, some of our parks set out. We have residential areas, commercial areas, but I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with some of our older commercial locations to maybe hopefully realistically improve some of them, as well as whatever the community is going to be looking for its plan going forward. I'd like to see somewhat of a flexible plan. I agree that these things tend to get stale over time. And I want something that reflects the values of the city. And in terms of the process, it's ambitious. I think it is, regardless, for 2 years, given how much input is going to be needed. In addition to the General Plan Advisory Committee, the consultant will be going back to all the commissions and committees in town, as well as other citizen groups. So I think there's going to be a lot of input with respect to that. And so I think the council over the years of this will have a chance to occasionally examine where the plan is. I would want it to be focused on getting done in a reasonable amount of time. One of my observations of the last general plan, I've made comment about it before, is that it took a very long time to get done. Probably by the time it was done, it was almost time for another plan in some respects. So I appreciate the presentation from Ramey and Associates. And I hope our real task tonight is to make a decision on the contract and the hiring, and I'd like to see us go forward and do that. And I'll make a motion for that.
Thank you. And we'll go on to Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you very much. I like that question. What will we consider as a successful plan process? And for me, it's a plan that has vision and a action that gives us the tools to get that vision built. In that vision, it has to be that robust public engagement. I mean, it means that the advisory committee, we just put together 21 people, that they're in fact the ambassadors of the plan to the other 60,000 people in town. They have to be outreach communicators as well as learning everything about the general plan. That's a big role for them. And then it has to be transparent. It means that every single meeting that has to do with this plan has to be public. I mean, in a world of Zoom, there's no burden to inviting the whole community into every advisory committee, subcommittee, or everything has to be transparent and public. That's just key to the vision there. And, it has to be climate responsive to all the emergency issues that we've identified as priorities. And it has to do something about our affordable housing crisis. One of the questions I wanted to ask the consultant, and I'll make it rhetorical now, is we're seeing all of our modest price housing, and I love the term modest, that means like 600,000, but we're seeing all the lowest price housing in our community inflating and walking away from working class purchase. And that is going to be an issue that hurts us. I mean, you can ask this question in two ways. What do we do when all that housing is bought up to the next level with all the tech workers working at home from instead of in San Francisco? Or you can ask, who will do our work for us in our community? Will they commute to our community? Are we complicit to the climate crisis that creates? What happens to our community demographically when you push out because of real estate pricing? And, is there a local answer to that? It's a meta question. So all that is really key that this general plan have conversations about. The other thing is I just wanted to say that the interview process for this consultant was eye-opening. It was educational, it was inspirational to hear all three speak and to figure out how the industry has pivoted to specifically focusing on the things that Petaluma is focusing on. I mean, the equity issues, the justice issues. Somebody dropped in the term Jedi in one of the interviews, and I thought, you can make the panel smile. That's positive. But so many good ideas, and this team had so many of the best partners of those ideas that that's part of the reason it was unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Member Barrett. Two things that came to mind. I want to echo Josh Simon's comment about translation. I hope that we're planning to translate these meetings. Otherwise, we won't be reaching 20%. Great. And all materials too. If we have a web page on it, I hope we can translate that and really try and make it as inclusive as possible. And then the other thing that the comment about VMT made is just technology. And generally speaking, whether it's transportation technology and micromobility or face recognition technology and things like that, just some sort of an assessment of technology trends that are coming that cities need to be thinking about, because there's things that we don't even have any sense of that are going to be coming, and hopefully there's a flexible way that we can incorporate new technologies, but also protect our citizenry and promote them where it makes sense.
Thank you. Mr. Healy?
I believe Dennis was first, but I just wanted to second Mr. King's motion.
Okay, thank you. And then go on to Councilmember Posake.
Yes, I'd just like to, I thought Councilmember McDonald was going here in his comments, but he didn't quite get there. And I wanted to suggest that although I'm sure that interviews with stakeholders are not usually in our society open to the public, but I think that's a move toward more transparency that I wish our consultants would consider. Thanks.
Okay. Do you have your hand up again, Councilmember McDonald? Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Not directly to Councilmember Posake's point, but I just think we'd be remiss if we didn't credit staff for all of the outside revenue effort they're making, and that's greatly appreciated by all of us.
Thank you. And I think it almost goes without saying that we always appreciate that. And especially now, because there is a lot in this general plan update that is being addressed. And, the whole, I believe it was Christina Paul brought up the issue of perhaps, getting monies to wrap in the fairgrounds. And I do think that would be a very good use of time and pursuit of money to be able to look at that holistically. So with that, we have a motion and a second, and we will take a roll call vote.
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to staff, and thank you to our new partners at Ramey and Associates. We look forward to working with you, and I hope our community does as well. So thank you very much. And with that, we will adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of Jim Harbison, Evelyn Posake, and Richard William Fisher Sr. Good evening.
Good night, all.
Right.